All right. I have even no idea what podcast this is.
53. I feel like you've been pumping out episodes. The pace has been
53.
crazy.
53.
Insane pace. And I just saw the notification for the one you dropped today too. That's gonna be
Yes, this
it's
is a
gonna be a good
very,
one.
very good one. So we are recording already, by the way. But yeah, that's a very good
Gotcha.
one. I mean, you know why, Dylan? It's because we have much more manpower right now. And so I used to get very frustrated with podcasts, like just kind of take forever and then something, and
Yeah.
and like this it's very spontaneous actually. There is some planning, but a lot of times I'm like, oh, what about this person? Just kind of how I texted you.
Yeah.
Like, just totally out of, as I was training, I don't know, I think it was with Tarzan or something. And I'm like, man, why do I not talk to Dylan? And then I'm like, I don't even know what we're going to talk about, but here we are.
Right.
You
Right.
know, I'm sure we're going to talk about all sorts of things. And yeah, it's really, really. But yeah, I have these two guys now working for me. They're right here. You know them, Ashton and Cooper.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really, it's really, really cool. And planning now, just finishing bunch of videos, kind of gonna make some new videos coming out, hopefully. I don't want to give anybody kind of hopes that are yeah, it's gonna be in few months, but we're definitely working. I'm working on bunch of videos kind of simultaneously, pretty much how I was showing you with the
Yeah.
presentations. That's kind of, I guess that's my way of doing things, because my brain just goes all over the place, and staying on one, it's just kind of sometimes gets me to wind up, and like this is like, okay, I can put that aside for a moment, and then immediately something else just pops up. But so for the people that don't know you, just give us a little brief introduction. I like the Christmas tree, by the way, before we go any deeper. And the reason I'm
Listen,
saying this is because I went today, like literally like 2 hours before we started right now, to get one. And so, yeah.
yeah, I got a DM a week ago from a guy that runs a Christmas tree farm. He was like, Dylan, I see what you're doing with that German Shepherd. There's a tree and a wreath here waiting for your family anytime. I was like, oh, sick. Okay. It's like, all
Beautiful.
right.
Beautiful. Yeah, when I brought mine, Natalia was like, oh, we are supposed to go together unless you brought it from the forest.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Anyway, give us a little kind of about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, my dog training beginning and up until now is pretty straightforward. I think it's been about 6.5, 7 years I've been training dogs now in the pet training world. I got my start just randomly. I had nothing going on. I was working a dead end job and I just sent a resume to this company that, the usual suspects, boot camp, 2-week board and train type thing. But
Mm.
at the time, I literally don't know. I've never taught a dog his name before. And they just on a whim took me on. And it took me about a month or two before I realized that, like, I really hope this is not dog training. Like, it has to get better than this. Maybe I'm just bad, and I mean, I was, of course.
Man, that's
Um,
kind of crazy. Sorry to interrupt, but like
no,
out
please.
of nowhere, all of a sudden, okay, I'm just gonna be a dog trainer, and let me just see if I can get a job and learn the craft.
I mean, I worked at an Amazon warehouse in security for,
Mm.
like, a year, which was just miserable, and then I ended up being in management at a UPS warehouse, and that was even more terrible. I was like, "Dude, I'm just gonna." I like dogs, like, who doesn't like dogs? And it ended up working out great. Um, I met some really good people. I was with that company for about 3 years. And I was very fortunate to have a boss that really just didn't care what kind of experimentation I did with methods, as long as the dogs learned what they needed to learn. So I went on sort of like a 3-year internet scouring every resource I could find, watching every video I could find. And I ran basically the entire, all the way from super heavy simultaneous backwards conditioning electric collar stuff to very, very force-free food and clickers. And I kind of ran the whole, as far as I know, I went from one end to the other.
I love it.
And it I kind of think like my classmate Moritz, how TWC is his start in dog training. In some ways, I'm jealous, but in other ways, I'm like, I like that I had to go through that type of experience, because like, you know how it is when a dog owner comes to you, we're usually not the first trainer. So because I spent years doing like the conventional things, I kind of can already tell within a few minutes what the dog has been trained with. You know what I
Right.
mean? I'm like, I know why he's looking at you like that. I know why he's compulsively wincing when you move your hand. I know why he's staring at your pocket. I've seen all of this for years. And like I said, I was with them for 3.5-ish years, and I started off on my own, and it was maybe another year kind of doing my own thing that I applied to TWC.
So
And
when you
it's
started on your own, man, this is like, I mean, you really, like, I don't even remember what were exactly my steps, but this is not about me, so I'm not going to even think about it. But typically, jumping into being and then I can't even say the word, but to work for yourself, most people are very scared to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was interesting because at the time, like, I knew I was still small fish or whatever, but I'm just training pet dogs for general obedience. And there is something that goes into that, but the methods that I was taught by this company were so atrocious that just by messing around and experimenting with things, I got much better, like, very quickly, like very, very, very quickly. So I didn't really have any intention of doing anything super challenging. I was like, I can teach dogs to come when called, and sit at a crosswalk and kind of not being annoying in the house. Like, those are things that I can accomplish. And I know now I can do them much better, hopefully. But at the time, I was I was pretty confident. Naive probably, but definitely confident.
Yeah, I think the confidence is like, if you don't have the confidence, I mean, eventually, even if it's just confidence without anything to back it up to begin with,
Yeah.
confidence is super important.
The thing where it gets kind of rough, I had a lot of times where, I mean, it's dog training. There's a lot of variables. Dogs are different. There are dogs, even if you just go in saying, I'm going to do obedience, you get dogs with weird quirks and little behaviors that are kind of strange. I just didn't have anyone to call and be like, hey, man, have you ever seen this before?
Hmm.
So I'm just sort of like, in the moment, I'm looking at this dog. I'm like, I really hope you don't try to rip my throat out. And I just didn't know. So it really was just like, I'm going to go bash my head off the wall and try to get as good as I can.
And
And when
you
it comes to
pretty
obedience and stuff,
pretty
it's good.
much you would take at that time anything, or you were a little more picky because well, I guess you were confident. So were you taking
Yeah.
anything that comes along, or what? How did that go?
Well, I had one punishment event where I was like, I can't, this is not a thing that you just do. So I probably spent a year just doing general obedience. And I got a call from this lady that had this pit bull, shelter mutt, something, the typical suspects. And she had mentioned, like, he's biting people and I don't know what to do. And that's where it really occurred to me. I'm like, hey, I feel like I'm okay at this obedience stuff. What if I start taking steps towards dealing
Challenge
with
yourself
behavioral
somewhere.
issues?
Yeah.
And I really got obsessed with the notion. And like, you can talk to dog owners, they'll tell you like maybe I owned a dog that I wish I had someone back then that could have helped, but we just didn't have any resources. So I was like, what if I could be that guy? Like, what if I can just figure this out? Again, I have no help. I don't have a mentor. And partly that's my fault, hubris. But I took this lady up. I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna go do loose leash healing, and I'm gonna reward him with food for not being an asshole and just see what happens. And this dog like blew up on me. He had a full bite on the inside of my thigh, and I'm just wearing like street clothes.
Of
I
course.
had no idea what protective gear was. And I left that scenario and I was like, okay, not so much out of self-preservation, though that does matter. I know I need to do something different to be able to help dogs like that. This is not a problem that you can just smash, because I naturally get into that mindset where I'm like, I'm looking at a problem like, I don't need anybody, like leave me alone, I'll figure it out. And this is just too complicated and too risky a business to do that in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it can go sideways for sure.
So at that point, I had been watching videos, Jay Jack, Larry Crone, those types of guys, and I went to a couple of their seminars. This is probably another 6 months after that of me kind of being punished back into the obedience world. But Jay and Larry, they told me, they were like, "Hey," at the first seminar I went to, they were talking about chase and catch video. And at the time, I had a really, really car reactive cattle dog, who's now actually my dog. But I had her scheduled, and I was like, it sounds like she might want to chase something. And the things that they're talking about, like with fulfillment and everything, these are things that just I had been talking with and working with trainers for years. And literally, the word fulfillment never existed. Like the concept of not even just like rewards, but like lifestyle. Like, is your dog happy? Not happy in the way that you think is happy, which again, the dog's perception is reality. So it doesn't matter if you're giving him food if he's fucking miserable. It just doesn't, he's not happy. So I was like, okay, I'll check out that video. And I watched that video. And of course, like just playing ball with a dog is probably not enough to stop a serious, serious issue. But it put such a significant dent in this issue. Like to the point where I've got her off leash in a month, just like playing ball with cars driving by. I'm like, this is absolutely insane. So that sort of started my journey into your material. I got possession games, and I think maybe the puppy walking video.
So
And I just
did you go to one of their workshops that they make together, or how did you?
I was at a solo Larry workshop in
Uh-huh.
Orlando, and actually that's the first time I ever saw you. You walked in.
Oh,
You walked
really?
in with the Italia. You were wearing sunglasses, and you went into the back and started making tacos
Oh,
because there was
wow,
food in
that's
the
so
back.
funny. That's so funny. I know which one that is, because that's the only time I went to see Larry, and it was just because he was close, and we just had to, I don't know, we had to kind of get together and say hello, and I
Yeah,
remember
so
exactly that time. Wow, that's very
you
interesting.
came in with the shades, flip flops, and you started eating tacos, and I was like, I think that's the chase and catch guy. It's like, holy shit. Um, so I went to one of the team up seminars workshops that they do. So it was Larry and Jay, and it was really Jay was like, hey, like if you have the time and the money, just go to the school. If you don't have the money yet, save it and go to the school. I was like, all right, because I had seen at this point, I had seen enough because I had been studying those videos. And that sort of leads me up to where I am now, past certification and all that, the expert program. And yeah, it's been
Yeah,
fun.
man, Jay went through a lot of crazy stuff this last year. Crazy,
Crazy,
crazy, crazy
insane.
stuff.
Yeah.
He called me out of nowhere um, last week because there was the Malinois Nationals. He's like,
Mhm.
"I'm in the area. Let's have dinner." I'm like, "Of course." And then I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm like in a competition." And then we tried to make it happen, and there was a brief opportunity that we could have made it happen, but then both of us had to kind of to meet halfway. We had to drive a little more than an hour each, and it just didn't work out. But yeah, very, very interesting. And I want to go back to this because like I don't know, like a lot of people are very scared to take the opportunity to have a business on their own, regardless what it is. I mean, it can be a tire shop or whatever. And especially when you have a family and when you have kids and everything, I mean, there is this risk, but unless you take the risk, you never get to, like I talk sometime lately with my daughter a lot about this. And it's like, well, you try. And if it doesn't work, then it didn't work. So what did you really lose?
Yeah.
Like, what did you really lose? But there is this thing, and especially Europeans are way different. Like, I think people here in the States, it's a little bit more having your own business. It's not as scary as for somebody in Europe, anywhere in Europe. They love to work in a big company, being the secretary or being whatever, like in whatever the big company, and think that they are very secure. But so you really,
A couple things.
what was your backup? Like how did you?
So a couple things to speak to the cultural differences. I think that just baked into the cake for Americans, risk has like a romantic ideal to it. You know, it's like, I'm just gonna screw it. Just like let it all fly. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, again, like you said, it's like, what was really the big penalty? Maybe I wasted some time and some money. It's not the end of the world. Like, people get sick and die. I can fail a business. Like, it's not the end of the world. When it comes to what really emboldened me, aside from the fact that, again, I was getting like okay results, I'm looking back at it and it's like, obviously I've gotten much better, but I was kind of doing the job. The thing is, and this is going to sound mean, mean, I was looking at my competition around me, and I'm like, dude, these guys have been training dogs for like 2, 3 decades, and I'm already competing with them. Like, I'm just going to keep trying. Like, I'm going to try as hard as I physically can to keep getting better. I have to be able to have a seat at the table here. And especially, I mean, I had an unfair advantage. I was learning how to play with dogs, which is just unfair. I'm constantly telling people, if you just learn how to play with dogs, you will be better than like 80% of the pet trainers in the world just immediately if you can do that. So I'm messing around with possession games and chase and catch, and I'm watching the dogs really come alive. And again, like my background was very suppressive electric collar stuff, like low stim conditioning. The dog is always in command, structure, structure, structure. So to me, the change was so drastic. It wasn't like this incremental attitude change. It was like the lights came on in the dogs, like just bang. It's like literally just because I'm playing with them and I'm experimenting. This was the one thing that I kind of stumbled upon on my own, which I am kind of proud of, is like, there was a point I asked, I was like, why are all these dogs in command 24/7? And I know that seems obvious, but there's so much indoctrination involved with like going to learn training from a company, and it's cookie cutter formulaic. I was told the first day I was at their headquarters, if I was seen rewarding a dog, I'd be fired. So like, I was very much groomed to be just, robot dog training soldier machine
Yeah.
with no expression, no emotion, no nothing. So when I saw that, like, wait, okay, training and playing can be the same. They can help each other too. But also, I don't have to be on top of this dog 24 hours a day. I can just like let him sniff. And the dogs just got so much better so fast. I think I took that as a sign too. Like, let's just go for it. Like, see what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when you talk about play and how a lot of people, and actually now it's becoming a little bit, thank God,
Right.
a little bit more, even if it's not quite there, people are
Right.
experimenting and then implementing a little bit more. But I mean, what better way to set the tone, to accomplish some rapport, right?
Right.
And when you accomplish that rapport, then you have then you can build the trust. I mean,
Right.
if your rapport is bad, there is no trust. So end of
Right.
the game, right? When you
Right.
have the trust, now you have motivation because you have rapport and you have
Yeah.
trust. And now
And
you figure it out, right? Now,
right.
now it's like, okay, how we can cooperate, how we can
For sure.
make that happen.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
that's
And
in
it,
essence what it is.
it's hard. It's hard sometimes to articulate to a dog owner, if I'm talking to another trainer, like what's missing. And the moment that you can see the tether made between you and the dog, and you're like, we can do anything.
Right.
Like we can, like this dog would follow me into hell right now and would just not care. He'd just be like, God, Dylan's my guy. Like that's a huge deal, regardless of what you're doing. It could just be basic obedience or whatever, but especially when you go into the realm of dealing with intense reactivity and aggression and severe behavioral issues, this is now like this is God. Like you
Yes, this
you
is the
can't
essence. Yeah.
you really can't go anywhere without it. And trying to jump the line there and skip that makes anything you do after corrupted. Like there's just no, like you might as well quit, you know. There's nowhere to go. And that's where I spend most of my time now. I don't take basic obedience clients anymore. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with nice dogs, teaching them nice things. But I almost exclusively have been taking aggression cases for about a year now. And you really just it's a non-starter. It's like you don't have gas in the tank if you don't get that link with the dog. You're really just screwed,
Yeah,
you know?
especially when you go into, as you say, the more special needs dogs, then you really have to, they have to trust you. And how do you go about trust? Do you go by suppression? Do you go only by being nice? Or do you find the middle ground, right?
Right. Right. Well, I think a lot of what training without conflict is to me is finding ways to interpret it and adapt it in a way that occurs to me is almost common sense. So I get a lot of trainers that they'll message me and they'll be like, "Hey, can I run some ideas by you? I have a weird case. Do you have time for a phone call?" And I love doing that, whether it's people in the school or out of the school, but especially out of the school because I like to see what everyone's doing.
Right.
And I'll have a call, and these are not bad people, by the way. I go off a lot about how bad the standards are in pet dog training, but I don't think it's full of bad actors. I think people genuinely are trying to do their best. But the things that I hear, I think you and I would consider to be insane, or like any graduates would consider to be just like crazy. Like, what are you doing? So there'll be a call. Like I had this guy, he's telling me I've got this he's a really nice dude, really, really nice dude. He owns a company training dogs. He's been training dogs for 13 years, whatever it is. And he's like, I've got this shelter pit bull that nipped someone in the house and now he's with me and I can't get him to trust me. He just goes off on me. He stares at me. He won't take his eyes off me. He flinches when I'm around. And I'm like, okay, how long have you had him? Well, I've had him for 4 days. I'm like, okay, so I wanted to tell him some dogs take longer than 4 days to get comfortable, but just I asked, what's the first thing that you did with him? What's the first thing? It's like, well, mom put him into the crate and I came back in a few minutes later. He went at me, so we had to deal with it. I'm like, all right, what does dealing with it look like? It's like, well, I had the bite suit on. I was able to like get an e-collar on him fast with a bungee and put a slip collar on him, and we just, we had it out and we dealt with it, and then we went outside. I'm like, okay, how long? Like, what did that look like, and how long was that moment? It's like probably like 3 minutes. I'm like, dude, so this dog who has some sort of antisocial notion, he got dropped off in a new environment. He is looking for his prophecy to be fulfilled. He wants reasons to not like you because that's his perception of humans. And the first thing you guys do is
Prove it.
warfare.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I'm holding the continuous button down for 15-second intervals. I'm jacking the number up. And I'm like, dude, like, how you just affirmed everything, every false ideal about mankind that he has had that's caused him to bite. You just put concrete on it. Like, you just cement. It's just, where do you even go from there? Like, you're screwed. That's not even violating the trust. It's like you didn't even attempt to build it. You know what I'm saying? And it's just, I think that when I get people asking me, like, what are you doing with these dogs? I have a hard time explaining this, but I'm like, dude, I have to let them know. Like you would put it, making your intentions clear. It's just, I have to let them know that I'm not conspiring to beat the hell out of him. You know what I mean? Like, you just, that's a non-starter, you know? And it's crazy how many people will tell me things like that. And it's not an exception. It's like
But you're right.
consistently.
It's not because of ill intentions.
No.
Like the ones that have those kind of, there is some, there are definitely sick people out there
Yeah.
that I mean, we've seen plenty of videos of people doing like really mean stuff for no reason. Like you can really tell that there is, it goes like that training. It's not about training. It's just very personal, and it's very emotional, and very very bad. But these are, I think these are really rare cases. Most
Right.
of them are, as you describe it, they're trying to do the best they can, and and for some reason, either your nature is like, well, let's just suppress it, and if we
Right.
suppress it kind of universally, then we've done our job.
Right. Right. It's a very like hammer nail thought process. It's like the nail went into the board, therefore it's over. It's like, okay, but the board is rotting. So like, what, how can we be happy with that? And I think it is in like a natural state for many of us to just want to like fix the problem the simplest, most obvious way. But I think there's also this really weird moral perversion around dog training where it's almost been like a mass brainwashing. I don't know if it's a deliberate, the Illuminati of dog they're trying to, or if it's just society itself. But I get these weird scenarios too where people will be like, "Well, Dylan, how did you get that dog in the crate?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I just put a leash on him and I just kind of moved him into the crate non-confrontationally." And this one dude, again, nice guy. He's like, "Well, I would never put that much pressure on a dog like that early in the program. So what I do is I've got a baseball field near my house. I restrict the dog's water, and then I run him to the bleachers, and I make him run up and down the bleachers until he's really tired and he hasn't had water in like a day. And then I put a water bowl in the back of the crate, and then he goes into the crate." I'm like, dude, so your moral compass just hit a hard line at me going, "Hey, dude, go in the crate." But then we've got water deprivation, forced marching. It's like, well, obviously this is just the humane way to, and again, I don't think, maybe as he was explaining it, he was kind of getting how weird this was, but I see a lot of that. I see a lot of that. It's really strange.
Yeah, that's like the. I mean, I know that podcast just came out with Stuart and Stephanie and Michael Ellis. So, we were talking about the AVSAB training statement. Really, we just kind of broke it down in two liners and talked about it, and it's like, which part is the ethical part, and when Stephanie had a really good one, and I haven't. I have to watch it myself, because once I do the podcast, I kind of am done. But I know that a lot just went in and out, so I love listening to it afterwards at some point, not right away. So I have to do that again. But what, like especially the first three people, when they look at, is it ethical? And it's this snippet, it's this still shot at the moment of the process. And that's the worst time to make a decision. If I mean, is it ethical eventually for that dog, as we were talking with Jim, to sit back in the behavior part of the shelter and nobody can take him out simply because it's not allowed to wear a prong collar? Which part is the ethical part is very tricky. It's actually not tricky when you start to think long term. But these are interesting ones. I mean, I guess in a very strange way, one can appreciate somebody just trying to think outside the box and experiment and play around with certain things. But yeah, some of them really are like, well, there's always that question, why?
Right. Yeah. And why does one bother you and the other does not? And unfortunately, I think there are two really unfortunate things. Actually, there's probably a host of unfortunate things, but the worst thing is that as passionate as we are, they are the same, if not more, about being right. So, like, we're in the same movie theater watching two different screens. Like, it's just two separate realities. I think that we cannot reconcile the differences ultimately. Like, we just have different notions about priorities and dog welfare. Like you're saying, they will take a snapshot of body language or something, which just drives me insane. There's an entire content machine on the internet of trainers doing dog body language analysis of dogs that they've never met, totally out of context clips. I mean, there are some that are obvious, like I'm not saying that it's not useful to talk about these things, but you really can take just a screenshot of a dog in a training session and it could look really bad. And ultimately, that screenshot is not indicative of the session, which may have contributed to saving the dog's life. You know what I'm saying? People getting stuck on the tail being tucked or a dog, putting his head down. It's like, why does no one ask where the dog is now? That's a very obvious question to me. Like, what happened? Because if I'm going to use an aversive consequence, punishment, however you want to call it, my motivation is I think this is going to help you. Either I'm really sure or you're in a really rough spot and I need to try to get you out of this hell that you're in. If I thought it wasn't going to help and I was still doing it, then I'm a sadist. Like I'm a lunatic, like the people you're mentioning, where there's something unhinged going on. So I think that there's this thought also too that from people that primarily or exclusively use positive reinforcement, because they are sort of a one note band, if they see a trainer using an aversive, well, it's like, well, obviously they must just do this all day long.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like this
Yeah.
this is just their one thing. It's like, guys, you took a 3-second clip. So like I can give you an example too, like a recent example. Sometimes bad body language is actually a good sign. So I had a dog go home from a board and train, and it was a huge goal for the client to be able to have him around their family on Thanksgiving. Just totally out of the question. They're just like, he had been to a really famous board and train program, thousands of dollars. Dog came back worse, sort of aggressive, more just like an explosive reactivity. He just won't stop screaming, charging people, whatever. Triggered by movement, all that. It's this little rat terrier mutt, really nice dog. I love this dog. But the clients send me videos. They sent me videos from Thanksgiving, and it was amazing. But there was one clip that I watched that was just like gold to me that I know if you just plucked a random dog trainer and had them watch this, they'd be like, what happened to this dog? Like, is he about to kill somebody? So there's a moment, again, thinking about the dog's perception, where he's standing in the middle of the kitchen. There's dogs around. He used to get into dog fights constantly. People are walking around, and he looks up at his owner and is like, unsure. it's not because he's waiting to get cracked with the e-collar. It's because, Mom, I've never been here before without losing my shit. So like the bad body language, which was 5 seconds, was actually a sign that he sort of
He's
reached.
trying to change and act
Yeah,
differently.
yeah. It's like I've never gone to the gym without punching someone in the head. And now I'm standing at the gym and I'm like, what do we do now? And then someone comes over and pets him and he's like, oh, okay. And that realization, which started with him looking stressed and awkward, that's like the biggest moment. That's way bigger than anything that I did with him because he realized it without human tampering. No one had to reinforce the behavior or send him away. It's just he was there and he was like, I'm going to try something different because I don't feel the same. And then it paid off, like so it's really easy to make a dog look bad, but I want to know what was the result. Ultimately, that to me is the biggest thing. Like, where is the dog right now? Like, is he playing with other dogs and meeting up with friends in their backyard and having a good time? Then yeah, I do think it's a worthy trade that the dog yipped when I popped his collar one time. Like, I think that's a clear, obvious trade. I don't understand the moral confusion, you know?
Yeah, but it's very rarely. I guess it's very hard to keep track of, like, that's one thing that, dog sports, you can do that with. There is some statistics, some scores are kept, and in the pet dog training world, that's very, actually, it's not even, it's not happening, and I don't see how it can really happen. But because, like, what I'm thinking is, somebody can say, well, I've had my business for 30 years. I,
Right.
I wouldn't be able to have a business for 30
Yeah.
years if I wasn't good at it.
Right.
Or I've trained so many dogs and whatever number it's thrown. And it is unfortunate, but I don't think there is any way around that.
No, so in the pet dog world, you're right. Like the sports that is a measurable point scale statistic. You can point at placings, winnings, your scores, and you cannot get better than an objective mathematical result. The closest thing that we have in pet training, in my opinion, and it pales in comparison, but it's the only thing I can think of, is video documented evidence. So I I noticed, especially coming out of graduating TWC, I'm looking around at the online space and I'm seeing there's a lot of conversations about pet training. There's a lot of conversations about behavior and aggression and reactivity. Has anyone ever actually just shown a dog? Like just show me dogs. Like again, this is not as good as saying I scored a 98, but if
No,
you
no,
can
you're
show a
right. You're
dog,
very right. And this is actually why people like to go at your social media, because that's exactly what you're doing.
I show
And
everything.
and there
Absolutely
is
everything. Yeah.
and the dog owners and the trainers are kind of hungry for this.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
dares to, and
Right.
when something gets kind of edited and you pick the best version of whatever,
Yeah.
like, it's very difficult to convince somebody that that's really what's happening. But when
Right.
it's organic, people like to see that. So you're actually right about that.
The pet world has been almost gate kept and run by trainers that go out and buy a Dutch Shepherd to use as their demo dog, and they take videos of them healing in an empty parking lot, and they're like, "Well, look, I can do it." It's like, guys, like no one gives a shit about that. You know what this is. Like that's it's a total it's all smoke and mirrors, hide the ball. Just like you're saying too, the video editing is so deceptive. And again, I worked in that area where we were taught how to make the dog look better and orchestrate it and prepare the dog to go through this section with distractions so that he looks better on camera. It's all false. It's all false. So I I just genuinely just show, hey, here's the dog, like back home. or the first week with me. Here's some of the things that we're doing, and then check in like a month, 6 months, a year, and I'll let you know what's going on. Because like that's the only thing that matters. Really, it's the only thing that matters. You know?
Jim had a super idea on that podcast. I'm sure you listened to it, because we did touch upon this with the demo dog of the trainer, and typically it's a
Yeah.
Dutch Shepherd or a Malinois or whatever. And he was like,
Yeah.
take a dog from the shelter.
Oh, 100%.
Take a dog
Yeah.
from the shelter, make
Yeah.
something good, and it goes from every angle you look at it, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it speaks so much louder of your
Yeah.
skill, of who you are as a trainer, who you are as a person. Like that was just so brilliant. But
So hearing you
every
guys
once in
talk
a
about
while I
that,
have this. Every once in a while, because we breed the Malinois, so somebody would be, well, I'm getting a puppy and it's gonna be my demo dog.
Mhm.
It's not that I'm against it, but it just doesn't. It's like, man, like my demo dog. It's strange. It just doesn't. I don't know.
it's like showing up to your first basketball practice with $300 sneakers. It's like, dude, you've never been here before. Like
Good
this
one.
isn't real. Like come on. And when you hit that point of the conversation with Jim too, it made me think about the practical exam. So I had fully intended, once I was given the directions, I was like, I'm gonna go get whatever I normally see, which is typically, shelter pit bull mutts, and I'm gonna go. Maybe it'll be a low motivation dog, and I'll really have to try to get juice out of this thing, or it'll be the opposite. It'll be a totally haywire dog, and I'll be able to show a representation of what I deal with. And it just so happens I had this young, highly motivated German Shepherd, and just like again trains herself, and I'm like, I can't. I have to submit this because I think I might pass. But this isn't what I normally am dealing with. Like I felt gross. I felt like I cheated. I was like, this is like give me like a Bernedoodle or something weird, and like let me get him to flip into heel for my test. And I just didn't. I couldn't pass up the nice dog. But that's
Yes,
again, you're
of
you're you're
course.
right. Like you should try dealing with weird dogs. There's a hunger for it too. And on the demo dog thing, I also get people. I'm the last person on earth you should ask for business advice, but I'll get people that'll ask me like, "Hey, like, what do you think about social media videos? How do I get more attention?" I'm like, well, like I go on your page, and it's videos again of your shepherd like playing ball with you and flipping into heel. You know what you don't see videos of? An off leash Saint Bernard doing just beautiful obedience, just really nice. People want to see their favorite pet breed doing cool things and doing nice functional things. And just it's a space that's just sitting there that no one touches. And I don't really know why, you know?
It's the competition. I mean, it's just social media. It's a serious competition.
Hmm.
It really is a
Yeah.
serious competition. But you're right. There is definitely a different way, and especially now, because everything becomes so. I mean, it doesn't matter which social media you open, which dog trainer. Chances are you're going to see very much a variation of the same thing.
Every time. Yeah.
So the moment you show that San Bernard,
Yeah.
just as a different
Yeah.
visual, it's already an attention grab.
Instant. It's this is free. If you know how to train dogs, this is free. Show a video of you sending a chihuahua to a target like 50 yards away. Bang. And hashtag Chihuahua moms. And it goes off. Like everyone, we've all seen German Shepherds, guys. You know what I mean? And I love the German Shepherd, but like you're saying, you flip through. I'm sure your Discover page is all training, dog training too. And it's just male Shepherd, male Shepherd, male, male, male. It's like it catches your attention when you see like an XL bully or a lab because it's become almost like off breed for some reason. It's kind of weird, you know?
What do you like more? The interacting with the dog or interacting with the owners? I guess before you start, I guess where I'm going with this is a lot of times trainers, even though they say they love to do the dog stuff, they actually really want to get approval from the owner that they are very
Yeah.
good dog trainers.
Yeah.
And they go in this insane analogies, like one after another,
Yeah.
to where it's just begging the owner to say, yes, you're right. Yes, you make so much sense. Yes, you're right. And
Right.
ultimately, it kind of just stalls the whole interaction between the client and the trainer about the dog.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's similar to what we were talking about earlier with intentions and rapport building. It's the same with the dogs and the clients in a lot of ways. So trainers that act that way, I think it's obvious to many dog owners that this guy's trying to sell me on something, or he's like, this isn't educational. This is about him. So dealing with the client, I treat it as an art form itself, and I'm always trying to get better at it like I am with the dogs. In terms of what I like better, I think before, when I didn't work for myself, it would have been easily the dogs because I'm getting given clients. Like I'm just getting random people. And nowadays I can be very selective about who I work with, which is one of the things that's made me love dog training again. It's just that sometimes I'll get people asking like or talking about how do you motivate your clients. It's like I don't take on clients that need to be motivated. You know what I mean? And especially in the field that I'm trying to carve out a space in with behavioral cases, the people are like locked in. A lot of times desperate. They're like, dude, I didn't even know there was a chance we could do this. I'm just like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And in that event, if you have that with the client, you can really treat them almost like your friends. Like we have a good time and it's really enjoyable. If you're doing a private lesson with a guy that's like checking his watch and chasing his kids around and
I
taking
know.
cell phone calls, it just like kills. It used to kill me, dude. Like I would be so pissed off. So it's it's close for me. I don't really want to fence sit this. So I am ultimately going to pick the dogs, but I do truly love working with good people. Like I think that is I'm very privileged to be able to be this picky and take on cool clients. You know, the reason why I pick the dogs is because they're, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. In a board and train with an aggressive dog or a dog that doesn't like people or whatever, I'm looking for like three moments that are like the peak of dog training for
The
me.
breakthroughs, yes.
Right. The first one is when I come down to his crate and he's wagging his tail at me. I'm like, ah, love that. There he is. There's a dog, right? We're maybe not at square one, but we've got back out of the negative. We're at square zero. There's the moment when a dog has never been given true freedom off leash, where like I just actually got this on tape with my board and train right now, where like people would call it a check-in. Oh, look, the dog's checking in with you. You should positively reinforce that. No, dude, she was looking at me going like, "Hey, is this okay? Like, can I go?" Because he had never been off leash like this before. And then like, dude, get out of here. Don't look at me. I don't want you looking at me. Forget about me. Seeing them let that go and take that step is huge. And then finally, I would say getting a dog that is convinced himself that he does not want to interact with people, that not only do I don't have to settle for being neutral. I can actually like enjoy this. Once I see that happen, I know that the dog can be saved. And that's the biggest like I love that moment. So it's usually there's a few of those over the course of a couple month program or something. And that's what I'm always chasing those, you know.
Yeah, that's very nicely put. Like I mean, when you put it this way, I have to agree with you that the dog side is probably way more rewarding. You know what it gets upsetting often in my mind is when when a trainer will say, well, everything fell apart because they weren't able to follow my
Right.
guidance, my instructions, my, whatever the protocols were.
Yeah.
And 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 as a trainer, you never, I mean, you gotta think that you have to tailor that, whatever that protocol is. If the owner cannot follow it, whose problem is it really, right?
Yeah. 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 There's two coping mechanism, convenient parachute strategies that I see people fall on, at least in the pet world that I can speak to. One is that my client's lazy, and the other one is that the dog is just too genetically gone. It's just there's just no hope. And by the way, I'm not going to make the claim that every dog is genetically pure and every client is perfect. Like there are definitely situations where you have to look at a dog and go like, dude, I think he actually just can't. He's not conscious. Like he's actually out of control. And there are clients that you're just like, man, you just shouldn't own a dog. Like just shouldn't happen. But I find when I look back, it's like you just said, I look back at dogs that I wish I could have a second crack at. And I think that in some ways I was trying to convince myself, the owner just wasn't committed enough to own a dog like that. It's like, well, dude, she's a medical student living in an apartment building, and I gave her all of this busy work and all of these protocols and all of these techniques. And I know nowadays that I would look at those instructions and go like, dude, who do you think you're talking to? Like this is not like she's not a dog trainer. Like, what are you doing? So absolutely part of the skill set is translating this over into practical reality. Like why it's very selfish in a way to want to just constantly train the dog the exact way that is your ideal. Part of the fun for me is sort of like the playground of dealing with weird dogs in suboptimal environments. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know that like this dog probably shouldn't be living in this place, but like what can I do to try to like being dealt a bad hand and still trying to win is really interesting to me. So if you can flip that in your head where it's like, yeah, I could just complain about the client not being able to run with the dog or not having a lot of spare time, or if it's reasonable, I can try to come up with this really cool sustainable strategy for both parties
Right.
and see where it goes. Like there are times where I feel like you can really just look at it as more of a challenge than, oh, look at this lazy person that just and the dog is just too far. It's like, well, you didn't really try a lot of the time, in my opinion. You know.
I think, like, probably a big difference and that goes both ways for the force free and the balance trainers, like but basically the ones will go crazy in differential reinforcement and just kind of try to derail the problem, and the other ones will just suppress, and of course they will reward good behavior, but it's all based on suppression or differential reinforcement again. But very rarely a trainer thinks about how to change perception and create a different habit in the dog that actually is going to stay there. And unless you change perception of how that problem is looked at, it's your job is not done.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of behavioral modification programs, $10,000, $12,000 programs that are literally just basic obedience and muzzle conditioning. And people just think that's as far as you go. Well, if a dog has done this, he's just destroyed, can't be fixed, can't be addressed. The trainers go into the program already knowing what's going to happen. And then simultaneously will say train the dog in front of you. But you're literally just doing the same cookie cutter sort of like mechanical, socially disconnected drills over and over and over again with the thought that, well, if we just do enough down on place, he'll eventually just love dogs. But guys, that's that's not going to happen. Actually, if you think again about the dog's perception, you're thinking, well, I taught him how to down and he's taking food, so this is good. Okay, if you stop thinking about yourself and you think about what the dog sees, he sees himself on the outskirts of the park, confined to a position, while everyone around him is having a good time.
Right. Right. Kind
It's
of
like,
going back to the story that you just told about the dog that all of a sudden has the freedom. He's in the Thanksgiving dinner and he's like, now I need to choose how to act.
right, this is a new world. Right, right. It's totally new. And that doesn't require maintenance. So that's actually why I think people don't think it's real. Because if you actually get into a conversation, the whole like, oh, aggression can't be rehabilitated and this type of notion, there are trainers that literally don't think that dogs can emotionally change. It's just like you've said in the course, like they're just trapped in operant conditioning. It's just I'm constantly reinforcing conditioned behaviors, and that's as far as we go. It's like, dude, but like if you stop being so quick with the timing with the electric collar, I know that 1.2 seconds and my ergonomic leash popping techniques. It's like, dude, what if you just let the dog breathe for like 10 seconds, let him blow up a little bit, and then just watch him? Because there's a strong chance that this dog that you've been hiding and manipulating and controlling, he's just going to go, dude, why am I doing this?
Right. There
Like,
is at some point in the training, and any training, regardless of we're talking behavior problems, bad obedience, high level sport, whatever it is, but there is a moment where, and it's a very beautiful moment where you allow the dog and you actually not just allow it, but really, really make them become very aware that they do have that choice to play with an experiment. And I think that's when the brain starts to really work and starts to make decisions. But it's
right.
not, as you said, it's not your typical operant conditioning. Okay, there is the behavior and the consequences. It's not about the consequences that get delivered about reinforcement and punishment. It's a different experience altogether.
Yeah. And it's like when a dog realizes the freedom and he has that self discovery that, like, I don't need to do that. There are other options. I've totally removed myself from the equation as the trainer. So, so my take is that the more that I can be removed from whatever changes happen in the dog's mind, the more sustainable the result because I'm not moving in with his family. So the dog doing better with people is not conditional on me standing there telling him to heel because he was given the chance to just go, hey, this is okay. Whoa. At that point, I look at the dog and I'm like, you're fine. Like it's gonna be fine. Of course, there is some level of maintenance and there's regression and leftover bad feelings and stuff like that. But I feel like if you're not allowing the dog to have those moments, it's very easy to believe that they can't change because you're just keeping them on the other side of the glass just permanently. They're not. They never have a chance. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Going back to that thing about the again, when somebody would say, well, aggression cannot be rehabbed, you can only just suppress, maintain, and whatever. And it just tells you that you don't understand that you can change perception,
Right.
just like you can be I mean, you can have an enemy and it can change to a very different outlook at some point, depending on the conditions and the interactions you had to go through with that person. I mean, that's not even, there is no need for research or scientific experiments to know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
the other big one is, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking that I remember feeling helpless when I started, and I would just kind of like, someone fills out the client survey to the company I was working for, and they lied, and the dog is actually extremely reactive, right? The furthest that I was told to go is just obedience with an electric collar. So inevitably, what you get is an arms race between you and the dog, where he's just on the edge of explosion, knowing that I'm dialing up the e-collar remote, and it's sort of like who can go harder, who can hold themselves back, and you create these jittery dogs that are just, they are time bombs, right? They're right on the edge. So I think that there's this, because that's so unfortunately common. I do truly believe that people think that that's, oh sorry, dog's just done. Like, you can't go beyond that. You can't beat that. So there's this entire culture of like, we just work through it, which is sort of like this vague code for you're going to be doing this forever, and this is a terminal reactivity issue, when you're just really,
And
again,
this
you're
is
just
when the
reinforcing things.
owner fails and the trainer
Yes.
says, well, they couldn't follow my instruction, because this is like
Right.
impossible task for a
Right.
person to do.
Right. They because the client didn't want to go out at 6 a.m. before anybody else is out with a bag of kibble in their pocket, walking in figure eight circles and running away whenever people walk by. Like that's just not a sustainable life. It's not real. You know what I mean? I wouldn't do that with my own dogs. That's miserable. So if you don't, like, if that's where you're at and you think that's as far as it can go, that's totally fine. I disagree. I would just ask, why are you selling a behavioral modification program if you know that it's not real, in your opinion? You know what I mean? Like, don't tell people you're going to modify or rehabilitate anything if you're literally just doing obedience drills and counter conditioning with a clicker. Like, that's, and food. Like, that's just not, that's false advertisement.
It is tough, man, especially, I don't even know how I went there right now, but just being a city dog, it's just not easy for most of the dogs. If they're a very normal, outgoing, lively, excited young dog, they don't get enough. They don't get even remotely enough of what they need in a city environment by getting the best dog food, getting the little mind games or button talking games, or like they want to play, they want a roughhouse, they want to like just there is a need for open space,
Yeah.
and somehow the culture starts to focus on, well, how can we numb them down? Let's put
Right.
them on Prozac. Let's just numb them down. Kind of like with kids, really. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really not that different, and it's sad. And when I came to this, and I for a big part of my life, I lived in big cities. Like I grew up in a big city and moved to a different country in a big city. I've just had a lot, but I kind of forgot that. And it was, I think, a year or a year and a half ago, I just brought my Tarzan, my Mali, with me to Bulgaria, in the capital. And I rented Airbnb, and here we are. He's like, let's go out. And I'm like, dude, there is no out. I mean, we need to, I'm putting you on a
Yeah.
flexi, and we're walking around. And within a week, he started to be the city dog. He started to enjoy little smells and marking and whatever. And you're like, wow, that's not what's about.
Right.
And I think as trainers, we are failing in this way to educate owners to really, even with the smallest dog, even with the fattest dog, like take it out. Like
Right.
take it out in open space and let him
Yeah.
feel what nature calls it for, you know?
People don't know. And these are people that love their dogs. Like you're reminding me that there were kind of like over the course of taking the TWC course, there were just bombs going off where like we would cover something in the class and then I would see it in real life. And I had a house call where this family has these three gigantic male boxers in this tiny little house, and the dogs are starting to fight. And they've got this little pen. So the dogs basically live in this hallway, this little kitchen area, living room, and then they have this small pen outside. And I'm talking to the owners in the driveway, and then I ask, can we walk around the property a little bit? And I look on the backside of their house, and they have a backyard the size of like a golf course. And I'm like, how often do the dogs get out there? Well, they've never been out there. Like, so these are people that love their dogs. There was one thing that the guy said. He was like, I just don't know why they're having so many problems. We love them. Like we make them cupcakes for their birthdays. And that disturbed me. Like I'm just thinking I would almost rather you be villains. Because like you really are trying. You just truly are so disconnected from the reality of what it is to own a dog. And I'm thinking about these boxers inside of this sardine can, looking through the chain link fence at the woods and the fields and everything. And I'm like, dude, like they're losing their minds. These are like, what happens to an adult man when you put him in solitary confinement?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was just to think about. Yeah.
He goes mad. He goes mad.
And can you
You know what I'm
control
saying?
him? Of course.
Right.
Ultimately, you're
Right.
gonna win.
Right. And a lot of these clients, I think they do expect that like the dog trainer is going to come over and apply structure, right? Like he's going to come over and teach the dogs to stop being bad. And I'm like, I go over there, I'm like, guys, hey, here's a link to a website with 50-foot lines. I've got a few in my car. We're just going to take the dogs out in the woods right now. And I didn't leave until they promised we're going to take them out every day. I was like, you're going to be fine. Like there's nothing wrong with your dogs. They're just truly, they are like sensory deprivation science experiments, just losing their shit. And all of that tension's bottled up, and they're just turning on each other over nonsense. But
And the most
it,
frustrating part to this is, again, from being a very caring person, they would go to the vet, and the vet would totally just flat out, just right away prescribe something to just.
yeah, yeah, and it sounds as if like it's so insane. It sounds as if it's bad balance trainer propaganda. Oh, there's this secret epidemic, quiet epidemic of dogs being drugged. This is real. I would say 1 out of 3 dogs that I get
Yeah, that
are
was my
are
next
either.
question.
Oh yeah, easily one of 3. I've actually thought about this quite a bit, and the stories I hear about people that have been scammed by veterinary behaviorists are insane. Like it sounds like I'm making shit up. So where a woman with this really big, nice, long-haired German Shepherd saying, "Oh, he's charging people at the door. He's being crazy. We can't have people over anymore." And well, we had an evaluation. The lady came over. The dog was crated on the other side of the room. The lady's here, sits with us in the living room for a half hour. The dog didn't stop barking. So she said, "Hey, like we could look to try some anti-anxiety meds." There was never a mention of or a question of what's his daily life like. Does he have anything to look forward to? Like, does he have a reason to live? I've never had a client tell me that a veterinary behaviorist recommended playing with their dog. And I ask every time. Literally not one. In the dozens and dozens and dozens at this point.
Yeah.
Not a single time, you know?
I don't know
And
if you were on that call. I mean, it was probably a couple of months ago, and out of nowhere, it just somehow it came to my head, and I asked everybody, how many of you guys, it's like the graduates, we had just a standard Zoom call, and I'm like, how many of you have had dogs that are come to training that have been on psychotropic medications? Every single one had at least one dog. Then I was like, I asked them, well, what is like the youngest? The youngest was 6 months old. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you do on a 6 months old? Like, how could you, like, what are we doing?
Right. Then, and what's the off ramp?
And what's then the off ramp? The next question was, any of them that are on meds, was there a plan how to reduce it and eventually take them off the meds? No. That's disturbing. That's really, really disturbing, and it, like, of course, you can have the animal behaviorist that has gone through some schooling, but you have the typical veterinarian that doesn't even have that kind of education. They still prescribe it. Chewy gives you prescription for Zoloft and whatever you want. But even when it's like, I've done it a few times myself because I need to know. I've gone through like the questionnaire and everything, and just because you're answering a question that is guided to be answered in a certain way, you are gonna subscribe psychotropic medication to the dog based on what that owner's telling you. And that owner has no idea of basic behavior in a dog. They're convinced that this is what's happening. We know that all the time. Every time, well, okay, not every time, but a lot of times, like probably most of the time, owner will come to the dog trainer and say, I need this kind of obedience, or I need this to be done. And unless the trainer starts to dip a little bit deeper and it's like, well, why do you need that? And you start to find out what the issues are, because the pet owner comes with their own prescription, what they need already.
Yeah.
And when you go to the vet, of course they give you a medication, because you're basically going and you're asking for medication.
Yeah. Yeah. And often the things that pet owners actually want, they don't even know are options.
Right.
It's like, you're telling me I can just walk my dog without having to tell him to heel? Like, that goes against everything I've ever heard from a dog trainer in my life. And the same thing too, on the behavior in the house and the dog's losing his mind. He must be aggressive. He must have an anxiety disorder. When you tell someone, hey, like, what if you just go play, like, you have that soccer ball he likes. What if you just carve out 20 or 30 minutes every single day and go play with him and come back inside and just report back to me what happens? How many of those dogs just change? Dogs that people have been told your dog is just a monster, literally just from a tweak. And obviously, like, many of these dogs, they require more work than that, but just baseline dog ownership, simple things. Just I don't know if it's deliberately ignored or if there's some sort of agenda, but I just, it's like you said, there's never an off ramp. Like, how are we going to get the dog off of Prozac? Never. It's just an indefinite life sentence. It's insane. It's diabolical. Absolutely insane.
How do you feel about those ones? Like, I'm just gonna shoot some kind of cliche sayings at you. The one that comes to mind just straight out is the how some trainers come, like, they try so hard to convince the owner that the dog is there only for themselves.
Right.
And if they do anything that remotely looks like they're just using you.
Right.
And this is the premises of where that's like your baseline where everything starts.
Yeah. So we could probably go a long time on this, but the thing that pops into my head immediately, if your dog is this hidden enemy that's just machinations and schemes, and he wakes up every morning and he's just like, how do I get one over on dad? That is a very good and convenient justification for all of the busy work nonsense that trainers tell people to do. So it's like, well, hey, what if I just have a week where I don't feel good and I can't do 45 minutes of healing comboed into duration down during dinner, comboed into grandma's coming over, place, tap, 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 play. What if I just like don't want to or can't do that? Well, obviously, your dog who is this supervillain, the second you drop your guard and you stop our structure, he's just going to destroy you. So it's a very convenient excuse to use really suppressive and not necessarily heavy handed every time, but just like because you can suppress dogs very easily force free.
Of
But
course.
if your dog is out to get you, then of course I need to have this dog trainer telling me, filling out my day of what to do with my dog. And people are astonished. And they actually, a lot of the times, I don't think believe me when I get people going, hey, I really would love to come shadow a day or maybe a week with you in a behavioral case. And I'm like, well, I don't offer that, but I'm telling you, you would be bored. Like, well, no, there must be something. I'm like, dude, I hang out with the fucking dogs, man.
Right. Right.
Like we hang out. Oh, but like I see he's on the couch with you. It's like, yeah, I don't care. Like that's oh, but like people will be like, man, I see that you're like letting the dog go out of the door before you. It's like, yeah, my control over the dog is not conditional on him waiting at the door. I don't think he's waiting for me to make a mistake so that he can crush me. They're like this paranoid antagonistic view of dogs sort of justifies that entire mindset,
It's a
you know?
deflection. It's like, let's do
Total.
something. Let's do something so we can. I've had not my own clients, but I know of trainers like this where they would present a very sound plan that I know the plan is sound, but the owner feels like they're not doing what they should be. They're not doing enough. They're not like
Yeah.
telling the dog to stay in a place for half an hour. They're not like, as you
Yeah.
said, who goes off the door first? Is it how long can he stay in front of his football before I tell him, okay, now you can eat? They like somehow it becomes, and I don't even know if it's ingrained in people or it's just human nature that there is that need of, okay, I have a problem and I should be like directly somehow changing it in with and they're thinking that they're changing it directly, but they're actually doing things that have no relation to
Yeah.
what needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are personality types that just feel like I need to be acting to reaffirm my control. But I do, at least in my experience, the bulk of it is just people having been conditioned by previous trainers.
Yeah, that's
And
kind of exactly what I was going. Like eventually, because
yeah,
I really think of a specific example, and that person eventually went back to that trainer that would put the dog in a place and they will try to tease them with toys or another dog barking at the dog and whatever, just anything so they can punish and put him back on place. And the trainer and the owner feel accomplished by doing that.
yeah. This morbid circus, um, it's I don't know. But it is false. Like anybody with an electric collar can make a dog lay down. That's not that's not impressive. Like anybody can just smash a dog into laying down. So for me, I mean, and I've seen you firsthand on the like preparing for sports with people. How often do you have to tell people, dude, slow down? Like
Right,
put
right.
like lower your left hand, put the remote in your pocket, give me the remote. Like when I told you to go walk over there, I wasn't saying head up, heel over there. I'm literally telling you just walk over there with your dog. And some people just compulsively, like they cannot, and I keep relating everything to behavioral cases, but I think that there's a crossover with people that are genuinely traumatized by their dogs being out of control, that they've sort of incorporated the obedience routine into like their panic response.
Coping. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the dog does too. And the dog does too. Like you can tell when a dog just out of context hears the word heel and you see him start to get weird, you can tell that this has just become part of your ritual to try to avoid disasters. So like it's just emotional conditioning. But I think it's like that for the people too, where I'm like, I'll tell the client, like, hey, like let's just sit down for a second. I'm giving you permission to we're gonna put him on a flexi leash. Don't touch the button until I tell you. Just I know he's going to the tree. It's okay. Like I've had times where I'll put a backup line on the dog and I'll carry it and I'll tell the client, like, I swear to you, if he explodes, I'll stop him. Like it's gonna be okay. And there are some clients you can make fun of them and it actually kind of they enjoy it. And there are other clients where you can tell they are legitimately
Freaking out. Yeah.
traumatized. And the starkest difference is definitely post board and train, where the client hasn't seen the dog in like 8 weeks, 9 weeks or something. And they've seen all of the videos. Like I'm sending them videos, I'm posting videos. They see the dog's off leash in public. He's getting pet by people, all these things, but they still cannot help themselves the first time. Here's the leash. Let's go for a walk. And like someone comes from around the corner and they literally flinch. And they're like, they pop the leash or they're reaching for the remote. And I'm like, hey, it's okay. Like I know you have to go through this. Um, and a lot of that is because they've just been taught by YouTube videos or trainers that if you don't have control over this maniacal scheming monster, then he's going to see you bend over to tie your shoe and go kill somebody. And I know that's extreme, but that's sort of like the mindset. That's how comical it looks, at least to me.
It's wild. Really. But it's so interesting. That's what is in a way interesting in the pet business. And especially when you get to the level that you can choose what you want to take as a dog train to work with. Like me, sometimes I'm like, man, I just want an easy dog.
Yeah.
Simply because an easy dog kind of lets you recharge and lets you kind of realize that the world is more normal than we think, you know?
Right.
It kind of
Right.
keeps you, and it helps you, at least in my situation, it helps me when I take an easy dog. Like right now, we have the funniest, I can't think of her name now. They're going to kill me. But everybody knows I can know the names, but it's like a 7-month golden retriever. She just can't help herself. It's a wiggle and a wiggle. It's like, okay, I'm on a sit stay, but can I at least wiggle? It's like you can wiggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But these kind of dogs, in a way, keep your mind and your target of what your goal is with the
Yeah.
difficult dogs, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you explained something, the exact phenomenon that happened to me a couple weeks ago where someone had a golden retriever, young golden retriever, rehomed to them. The owner had died or something. And I looked at the map and they're like 15 minutes away from me. I'm like, I'm just gonna go play with this dog. And it's not something I would normally do, but just like playing ball with a dog in someone's backyard and looking at the dog knowing there's no baggage, like you don't have any secrets. I'm not gonna like turn around and look back and you're like on me. Like I can just like these are dogs. Like
Yeah,
this
we
is
just go
you
off
can
guards and we
yeah,
find a way.
yeah. It is like a palate cleanser. And I do think that I would probably get bored of it pretty quickly. But mixing in a session like that where it's like, okay, the worst thing you do is pull on leash. The worst thing that you do is jump at the window. It's like, that's beautiful, dude.
And all
Like, I
for
love
good
that.
reasons, right?
Right. You're just excited. Like, you're just an idiot. Like, I love, like, I was talking recently, I think it was in a video where I said that I'm trying to get these nasty dogs to just baseline dumbass pet dog. Like, I just want you to be funny. Like, I just want you to look forward to things and act on impulse. I don't want you to be afraid to test things in front of me. Like, I want you just to be like, if you're gonna get some things wrong, it's okay. Like, I want to see a nice dog, and then we can start doing things. You know?
Wow. Yeah. What about the how are you still playing around with the going to the shelter and doing things with them? How was that? Because you did for a while for sure.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
kind of
mean,
want people to hear about your experience and why did you do it and what you get
yeah.
out of and everything.
Yeah. So I guess there are two primary motivators for me with working with shelter dogs. The obvious just dog loving person, you just want to help. These are the dogs that people have forgotten about. We can go in and do some basics and have fun with the dogs. I know what even just playing, the impact it can have on their quality of life. Just it's insane. And it's not even adding more time on, it's just changing the things that the volunteers are doing. So, hey, I know you take them for a walk once a day. What if every other day you play tug instead? So just like sort of wanting to give that to the dogs is really, really important to me. And seeing it over and over and over again help make the dogs more adoptable and get them out of there. And while they're there, have them not be miserable. Like that's just a beautiful thing. Probably more interesting to chew on is the selfish motivation in that dog shelters are such an atrocious, suboptimal dog training environment that I look at some of these weird situations and I'm like, I let's start messing around. Like what? So this dog's doing this behavior. I can see him for 40 minutes a week. Let's just start spinning dials and pushing buttons and just it's a really fun problem solving opportunity and it's just nonstop because the dogs you get there are just there's a lot of weird ones, you know, not necessarily dangerous dogs. Like most of them are really nice dogs, but just like weird quirks and weird issues. So it is a perfect dog training behavioral playground in a lot of ways, you know?
Do you ever get kind of stuck like in like I remember me way back, and that's way back when I used to work in that environment. There were days and nights that I'm like, I just need to go back to work because I need to get the dog out. That specific dog is just kind of just lingering in my head, and like I know that it depends. Like there is nobody else but me, and that's a
Yeah.
tough place to be. Like, did you ever had this?
Yeah. I would say so. There's one particular, I've kind of bounced around a few shelters. There's one particular shelter that right when I got home from testing from TWC, I was like, I need to find a shelter. I want to get activated. I want to go in and do this. So I've been there ever since helping out. I would say that the last 6 months or so, I've learned to put a more appropriate distance between the dogs and myself. So there was a session with a dog named Tanner about a week ago. We were playing, doing some obedience, things were going really well. And I gave the dog back to the volunteers and I was like, that was too much. And they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, we just very, very closely almost became best friends. Like it was about to happen. And I was like, call it a day, get him out of here. Like I can't do that to him. I can't do that to myself. And but to me, that is part of the problem solving opportunity. Like, can I help this dog without being his person? That is an interesting problem because
It's kind of like a
mm,
good teacher that you have
yeah,
the you know you like anybody that is in being a teacher, especially with young kids, if you start to get attached to them, it's kind of, it may not end well eventually
Right.
emotionally for both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. I went through, I think that we all at some level, again, just as people that love dogs, I tortured myself for a while. I got that out of my system where I'm just taking calls. They're like, we have something going on. I'm like, I'll be there at open tomorrow morning. Just like offhand, like I'll just do it. And partly because I've sort of started to protect myself more, and also the more unfortunate reality of the shelter becoming increasingly politically captured, where I'm definitely not, I haven't been like banned or anything, but there are people there in the bureaucracy that just don't like the way that I train dogs. It's become sort of easier for me to feel like, hey, they just don't even want me to be there. So I can draw a better boundary. It's much harder when I'm working with a shelter that's like locked in, going all out. I know that the staff and the volunteers are all on board. It's harder for me to sort of have that boundary. But in this case, they like there are people that actually just straight up despise what I do. So it's like, okay, then
Yeah, despise is
I'll
a very
just
good word. I totally can see how that can just be frustrating, and especially
yeah.
when you know that a dog's life is at stake. There's no sugar coating there.
So I can tell you a literal example that happened 2 days ago. And I think that there's a thought in some balance training circles that, well, the extreme force free advocates, they only exist on the internet. This is a Reddit phenomenon. This is a Twitter phenomenon. They're not real. Go out there and meet people in real life. We all want the same things. It's like, okay, that is a luxury opinion held by people that have not seen the reality of what happens when their rules are actually instituted with struggling dogs. Let me tell you an example. There's this 2-year-old boxer mutt named Scooby, boxer pit bull or something. There's nothing wrong with this dog. I played with him a few times, took him on some walks. He was just kind of sitting at the shelter for no good reason. I was actually preparing to offer a free board and train for this dog. I still may do it because I really like the dog. So he started to develop kennel anxiety. I was not told about this, by the way. So like this is being kept behind closed doors in team where they want to utilize their force-free resources. So the dog's starting to suffer. He's struggling inside of the kennel, and these people don't believe in playing with dogs. So like they're just not going to play with him. They decide they're going to call a local force-free trainer who I've had a few interactions with. And, this is your podcast. I'm not going to fly off the handle. This is a really bad faith person that has never trained a dog to any standard in her life. Her solution is I'm going to take the dog out of the shelter and he's going to live in my home for a few weeks or whatever, a couple weeks. And maybe, I heard that. I'm like, okay, maybe there is some sort of strategy that can be done here. Surely, if she's removing the dog, they're going to do some sort of training or something. So it turns out that this trainer just took the dog, had him live on her couch for a couple weeks. There's nothing being done, no game plan. She returns him to the shelter. The dog, upon entering the shelter and realizing that he's going back to prison, lost his mind and nipped an animal control officer. So this could cost him his life. He has a bite on his record. He's on a 10-day, 2-week hold or whatever. And he's this moment that was completely manufactured by force-free advocates could very well just kill this dog. And they would rather have that happen than me take a dog on a walk through a town on a prong collar. And they will tell you that much, that they would rather have this outcome. And they will clock back into work the next day
Right.
and
No,
do it again.
I know exactly. That's just heartbreaking. And
It's insane.
especially when these are not this we're not just having conversation. This is literally a real story that
Yeah.
just happened 2 days ago, and that's not the
Yeah.
only one that has happened anywhere.
Yeah. Right.
But their position is, sorry, their position is, it's better for the dog to be euthanized than being tortured. Like, when you put it this way, okay, being tortured or being euthanized, which one do you choose? Okay, euthanize me any day, right? But that's not how it goes. That's just such a wrong way to look at it. But especially shelters are stuck in this, and because of public relations and because of donation and because of well, there's quite a few different factors. Breaking that particular notion of, well, torture or euthanasia, which one? That's not the conversation we need to have. And there is no, like, I mean, at least for right now, I don't know. As you said, they are shelters, and I'm grateful that they are still places. And especially, I don't know how much shelters around the country are still kind of open-minded and are willing to help dogs and are willing to try, especially if it's it's your last resort.
Right.
Why not? I mean, people are dying from cancer, and they will do anything at this point. Why not, you know?
Right.
But what, like, rescue groups are way better, I think. Certain rescue groups. I mean, that's a lot of crazy stuff going on there as well. There is a lot of dynamics, and there is a lot of animosity, and some rescue groups, I know of rescue groups where they're just keeping dogs just so they can get money and
Yeah.
have a good car and whatever. Just they're in it for a very wrong reason, but it's so obvious. I mean, it blinds you, but they're still allowed to go on. And let's look at it on the good side. What is the good takeaways when you go to a shelter? What would you say? Why would some dog trainer go to a shelter and play around with those dogs?
Yeah. I I get asked questions pretty frequently too, where people are like, "Hey, I'm looking to develop dog training as a side business or maybe just a hobby, or I'm looking to just totally move into training dogs full time. What is like the step one first thing that you're doing if you're in my shoes?" To me, it's an easy answer. You need reps, you need repetitions. And the easiest thing to deal with when you don't really know what you're doing is a dog that has motivation and wants to do things with you. So, dogs in shelters are sitting there waiting for someone to see them. And as soon as they have a taste of that, like, wait, like, you're not just mindlessly walking me either. You're like, you're here with me. They are just on board. So you've got this almost perfect situation where you've got dog after dog after dog that, again, like, at least in the United States, they're mostly pit bull mutts. They just want to chase stuff and bite stuff and have a good time.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a playground to polish up basic obedience training, dude, like, go buy some tug toys, a ball on rope, go to a shelter and just go down the line. 20, 30 minutes each dog. And don't I wouldn't recommend someone new taking on an actual, like, behavioral case or anything, but the vast majority of these dogs, they don't need a lot. Like, just go have fun with them and practice. And you will see little quirks and differences in their personality and all of that. And you'll get enough of that where it's not so extreme you're going to be in danger, but you'll get enough that you'll get a lot of experience with a wide variety of dogs. And they spend most of their time in a cell. They're not going to turn you down,
Right. There is
you
that
know?
instant gratification. You feel
Mhm.
like you're every 5 minutes that you're spending there, they're not wasted.
Right. Yeah. And on the business end too, especially if you're training with play, the people there and the other volunteers are going to see that the dogs just they're happy. Like this guy, when he takes the dogs out and brings them back, the dogs are happy. This is like referrals forever. If you can get a shelter that will just refer clients, you know, there are a lot of scenarios where trainers can get their name and number, their business on a piece of paper that goes with the go home information from the shelter when someone adopts a dog. And if you prove to them that, hey, like I am making these dogs happier, better, they're learning things, most shelters are happy to do that. So it's a great, there's just so much to be gained if you're a dog trainer, especially if you're new.
Yeah, and you can even when like one of your dogs that you spend time with gets adopted, you can follow up. Eventually, you can get some lessons,
Yeah,
and you put your foot at the door as
100%.
an actually dog trainer, a real dog trainer without a demo dog.
Right. And you could be taking footage of this, and people can go to your website, they can go to your social media and see like he's taking every type of dog. Like he's got all of these, misfit mixed breed dogs and they all look really good. And it's just I feel like it's a gold mine. If you're trying to start a business, trying to get better, trying to get more clients, the shelters are just, again, as long as they're not ideologically just totally off the wall, they're going to be glad to have you too if you do a good job. So it's a total gold mine for sure.
And even if there is some clashes and conflicts with methods and approaches, like you can go along with what is acceptable, and then little by little say, well, you know what, I think I can help that dog, and let them decide if they want to help. Because as you know, in a shelter, quite often the volunteers and the staff, they start to get attached to a certain dog, and they really feel heartbroken that the clock is ticking. And sometimes they break down and say, you know what, go ahead. And those are really kind of breakthrough moments when this happens, if you can deliver.
Right. It is in those scenarios, it is funny. Again, we all have our biases and our experiences and all that, but it always is funny for me hearing people kind of refer to a method I would do as this like last ditch effort extreme. And I'm like, I'll play along and be like, yeah, man, I can't believe it's come to this. And then it works. And then they're like, wait, hold on. There's something, it's like a bomb goes off. Yeah, you can absolutely through the dogs get people on your side. And I I have no problem acknowledging that I can be hard to work with in some of those scenarios. Like, hey, I like to think I know what I'm doing. I'm here to help for free. You just can't if you start putting conditions on this, I'm just gonna leave. But if you're new, it can be kind of interesting to try to adapt. Again, like the problem solving element. Like they're telling me I can't do what I normally do. What else could I try? Just another opportunity, you know?
You can master certain skills, you can see the
Yeah.
limitations of certain approaches. There
Yeah.
is still a lot to take away. Like,
Yeah. You really don't have to be like me. I just can't help myself. Like I'll give an example. So with the political tide kind of going the wrong way at this one shelter, there's a couple volunteers that I meet up with that are just really dedicated, really cool in their own right. Just by working with me, they could probably just train dogs themselves. But they were bringing dogs to me, and the first one's wearing a bandana, and I'm like, oh, I wonder why they're doing that. Second one's wearing a bandana. I'm like, I look underneath the prong collars. I'm like, guys, I can't do this. I feel like I know we're trying to not get in trouble, but in good conscience, I cannot treat negative reinforcement like I'm trying to smuggle a bomb through an airport or something. Like I'm not, I can't play by these rules. I just can't. And they were like, all right. And it ended up not being an issue, but it surprised me how much I was bothered by that. Like I can't knowingly contribute to that atmosphere, you know, of trainers, like trainers taking videos where they've got their hands in their pockets where the e-collar remote is hidden. I just can't. I'm not playing that game. I'm not. If we're going to stand by our methods for the welfare of the dogs, I am not going to look like I'm concealing a weapon or something. That is a horrible, horrible message, in my opinion.
I always wonder how, because, like, no matter what your ideology is, when it's something that it's like it's your dog, or it's like really you've invested, and there is like feelings between you and the dog, and being volunteer, being a trainer, and you're a force-free trainer, how often do you think they would do something behind doors to get it done and save the dog, but keep the facade
Yeah.
and believe that, okay, I can do it, I know it's working, but most of you
Right.
will do shitty job, and you're gonna, so
Yeah.
I will keep the facade.
Right.
What do you think, how often that happens? That's always been kind of interesting to me, but it's not easy to, of course, how do you know, right?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify that. It's like when pollsters talk about accounting for hidden voters. It's like, dude, how do you even begin doing that on either side? Like they're hiding. It's literally in the name. So I think if I it's just it's alluring depending on who you're surrounded by, what the state of training is in your area. It's alluring to be able to say I'm an animal advocate trainer and use that costume and put that on your website. But ultimately the dogs do not lie. They do not lie. Like you just ultimately have to look at the result. So the it is infuriating at some level to think that there are people that are grandstanding the opposite of what they're doing. Like I totally, it does upset me. But what's worse to me is, and I like to think this is rare, when you show physical, tangible, objective, observable reality and evidence, and still you are met with disinterest and a lack of caring. So that is something that I've encountered on the force free and the balance side, by the way. So like we beat up a lot on force free advocates, and I think for good reason. I don't hide that. But I can think of another scenario. This was a huge eye opener to me about the state of like how dog training is spoken of, and especially online. But there was a dog at the shelter. It was one of those scenarios you were referencing before where like the dog was in such a rough spot. Even the more force free people were like, just call Dylan. So like this is the setup. Dogs in the shelter, and this is unfortunately common, and it's brutal to witness. Dog finally snaps, and he spends all day spinning in circles in his kennel. They have to towel him down at the end of every day because he's covered in saliva. And inevitably, what happens is the dog is burning so many calories, weight starts falling off of him. So this dog is just physically evaporating in front of everyone. And they tried their thing. We'll put a frozen Kong with peanut butter in there. We'll give him an extra walk at the end of the day. And, all this. We'll move him to a bigger room and just all this, whatever. Maybe some of
The
that will work with some dogs,
the
but
the
it's not.
enrichment approach.
Yes, yes. It's maybe with some dogs that will catch. It's not working here. So they finally, after allowing the dog to suffer a sufficient duration, apparently, they call me in, and I'm like, I'll be there in the morning, and I'm bringing an electric collar. If anyone has a problem, I'm never coming back here again. Get out of my way. Because they sent me a video of the dog. I'm like, I'm not looking at this. Like I don't understand how you can be in this building knowing that dog is down the hallway doing this and not be going all out. What is wrong with you? But that's a different conversation. So I go in. First thing we do is put the dog on a leash. I'm going to take him outside and see if we can interact with him. Like just kind of baseline, get an understanding. Like, who are you? Like, what do you like to do? Will you play? Blah, blah, blah. The dog, I practically had to carry him back to the kennel because he couldn't walk, exhausted. Like, truly, he's on a treadmill just constantly. The dog's destroyed. I'm like, all right. I put the electric collar on him and I stand at the end of the hallway. I told everyone at this point, there's a little bit of a crowd. People are like crying, dude. Like, it's brutal. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. He touches the wall, tap, tap, tap. He gets off. I stop. And this is simple. This is elementary. This requires no effort. Like a fucking baboon could do this, right? And would you know it, it works. I think we did 3 rounds of this maybe. And I had someone text me that night when they went to do night rounds, and I was like, "What was he like when you went into his kennel?" He was sitting there with his tail wagging, waiting for me to bring dinner or whatever. That dog puts weight back on, and 3 weeks later gets adopted, and he's home, and everything's fine. So I made mention. This is the point of this. I made mention of what I had done with this dog online, and I got fucking crucified. Crucified from both ends, by the way. So this is kind of like getting into the balance side. Big names, big names. So this is like just around the time where I started my social media. So like I'm small fry, hey, I'm posting videos, guys. And I'm just like, someone said you should never, there's never a reason to put a shock collar on a dog in a shelter. And I basically just told a short version of this story in the comments. I've got people screenshotting it, my comment, making videos, like super cringe, like dramatic piano music in the background. I do what I do to stop people like this, tagging me and stuff. And people that are industry veterans that are like, how could you ever do that? And not a single person asked, where's the dog now? Because what I would have told them is he's back home with mom on the couch. Just no one, like, I don't want to say no one cares. That's a drastic overreaction, but there is, I guess what I was getting at, to sum it up, there is a small contingent of people that genuinely, even when proven wrong, do not care. And they will war against reality until the end of time. And they can't, these aren't people that we should be looking to build bridges with, in my opinion. Like I think ultimately we just show the dogs until their voice just doesn't matter anymore. And that's a huge motivator for me, recording and posting as much as I do. It's like the dogs will tell you. So yeah, that was a huge eye opener for me, because I expect it from the force free side, but like seeing people like, selling online e-collar training courses saying that the electric collar should never be used in this manner, and what a blasphemous application of such a beautiful tool, and the blah blah blah. It's like, dude, you guys are crazy, man.
Oof.
Nuts.
Yeah, that's a whole man. Maybe we go into this a little bit, but before we get even there, how much the shelter environment can change, and everybody agrees that it's madness there. Like keeping the dogs from not going off just because. Imagine the change in the environment in that shelter.
Right. Yeah, like fence fighting. fence fighting, just stopping the fence fighting radically changes how the dogs even present to people. Like their entire, like, hey, you don't get to treat this like Fight Club where you just lose your shit. And the impact on their overall state of mind, what they're thinking and anticipating coming out of the kennel. These are things that a lot of people working at shelters just don't even, it doesn't cross their mind. So you've got a dog that has been allowed to fence fight at this one pen in the back for 6 months, just going nuts, running up and down. He's at the point where sometimes he'll run up and down losing his shit without even a dog being there.
Oh yeah,
And this is
it's
this this is
exactly
the
right.
same this is the same pen where you have people meet in, like adopters. Like, are you out of your mind? Like how like how is that? I feel like you don't need to be a dog trainer to see how there may be a problem with that.
But
But
going off of what you said about the force free and the balance trainers, what we just talking about, I bet you the picture that a lot of them will visualize is a dog shut down, sitting in the back in the corner, shaking and being universally suppressed.
yeah,
And that's not what that will do.
right, right. And like I guess to sort of steel man that position of skepticism, there are, and I know you see these guys too. There are plenty of trainers that I'll see go into a shelter and take an excited, exuberant dog out of the kennel, and when he comes back, the dog is just like, "Please put me back in the kennel. I don't want to be outside right now." And people see the prong collar, and it's like not a hard connection for a person that's just not into dog training to make. And it sort of speaks to the phenomenon of people thinking that we're all on the same side because sometimes we use the same tools. Like, no, man. Like, you're making happy dogs look suicidal. That's not, I don't care what tool you're using. Um, so it becomes hard to combat that. But I do ultimately think just showing the dogs will turn most rational people onto at least having their mind opened.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it will be incredible to be able to walk into a shelter environment as a somebody that wants to look at the dogs and take one home when they're not going out of their minds
Right.
behind those glass doors that you cannot
Yeah.
hear, but you can see the rage.
Right. So it's
How
it's
do
a
you
true
take a dog out?
right. It's a true cacophony. Like it's chaos. The sound is insane. You can feel the energy. And there are some shelters like what I'm thinking of off the top of my head. Most of the volunteers are old ladies. They're just like they're like 65-year-old old ladies that weigh like 115 pounds. And they're walking through this row of just, I mean, I know there's nothing wrong with most of these dogs, but they appear savage and unhinged, and their eyes are bloodshot, and their faces are peeled back, and like and you're just like, yeah, hey, by the way, you have to put a leash on this dog, but I'm taking the prong collar away. It's like, dude, what? You have to pick. Like, what are we doing? It's a total. It's insane. I don't know.
It will be interesting if I mean the like I really think the best way is for trainers that are capable to enter that environment and do some good stuff and start somewhere and adapt to what that environment calls for. Don't just try to go in and overthrow everything they do, but start to help. And then a moment will come, I promise you, a moment will come where there will be a dog and it's going to be, what do we do? And they can give you a green light. And then we can start making some changes in this environment, because everything that goes around with focusing on enrichment and focusing on well, we're gonna somehow, when people walk around, we're gonna drop treats through a pipe in the backside so they go. I mean, it's ridiculous stuff. But what is also really crazy is when you go to a vet as a pet owner and the veterinarian starts to lecture you why you shouldn't have a prong collar because the AVSAB has a training position statement.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can top that. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this too though. I've had board and trained clients in the past tell me we can't talk about this. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, I adopted a dog from a shelter and I signed a contract that if the dog was seen with an aversive tool on, they would take him back. It's a real thing. I I don't deal with those scenarios anymore because I just, again, I'm not playing this game. But that is a clear statement that I would rather this dog be in a concrete cell than running off leash because he wears an electric collar sometimes. Just like that's just a straight up declaration,
That's how
you
far
know?
the ideology goes. I mean, there's just
Yeah.
no boundaries of it. Really, the ideology takes over the life of a dog. It really does.
Yeah.
In Unfortunately, just as we talked about dog trainers, a lot of them just don't know better. They
Yeah.
that they are fed this, and they hear it from their authority figures, and it goes down all the way to the pet owner, and they get shamed. And it's like, well, why would you have a prong collar? This is why you have the problem to begin with.
Yeah. And I give people credit because every once in a while I'll get a message that's like, hey, it's something to the effect of I was kind of a hate viewer of your stuff. Like I saw someone shared one of your videos and I was ready to just like blow up on you.
Mm.
But you have something going on because these dogs, like this can't be a fluke. The dogs are happy. Like they're just happy. Maybe I'm not going to do what you're doing. Maybe I don't agree with it. But at minimum, I'm not going to just try to delete it from the surface of the earth because something is going on where the dogs are improving. There's also kind of the maniac worse than parody take, which is that I've had people say that dogs can pretend to be happy with me because they're afraid of the e-collar remote. So that's just an unfalsifiable claim that I like. There's no saving that argument at that point. Like it just can't go beyond that. But I think that even as trainers, like if I see a trainer deal with a severe car reactivity issue just using differential reinforcement, let's say that they did it, they proved it, and it worked. I would not be thinking I need to get back into my shell and quadruple down on my opinions and blow this guy up. I would be messaging him like, "Hey, dude, do you have time for a phone call? Like, I know you don't know me, but do you have like 15 minutes to tell me what happened? How did you do it? Like, I have to know how you did it." And
And this is a genuine interest. This is not a
curiosity,
joke. Yeah.
pure
Yeah.
curiosity. Like, is there something I'm missing? Because I'm constantly looking to challenge myself. And I I wish on all sides there was more willingness there. And that's I don't want to crack open the can of worms on the stim conditioning thing, but like I get people that see some of my training and they're like, see, this is what happens when the dog is properly conditioned to the electric collar. You see how he's running free and he's so compliant. And I have to be like, hey, he's been e-collar tapped like 4 times in 6 weeks. There was no conditioning done to the electric collar. Some people fly off the handle. Most of them go, oh, that's weird. And they have to think about the possibilities. Like maybe there is something going on that I just didn't have right. I know that's exactly what I went through doing e-collar conditioning for 3 years, basically, and having to be like, am I missing something? Like, why? Ultimately, the question of why are you doing what you're doing? If you can't give a coherent response, you have to think about what's going on. And in the same way, it's like, why do the dogs look good? I need an answer. I can't just get angry about it. That's just the way that I feel like dog training should be.
What about the men? How do you feel about regulations of
Disaster,
the industry?
disaster. This might be just the American bias, just kind of inherently being skeptical of that. It's we can't agree on anything. If we were to regulate electric collars, we'll use that as an example, electric collars, and say that, well, you have to take a course that shows you the right way. You'd probably get plenty of people that are like, that dude, that sounds great. I can just tell you, there's a very good chance the way that I use the electric collar would be banned. like, just immediately. And I would, again, just my stance, I would argue the things that were legislated would likely just be totally false, completely false. And you would get the same thing that you get with like the politicization of government agencies. It's just like as the pendulum swings back and forth, you're just going to get more and more radical either way. And I think it's inevitable that it would just become impossible to get an electric collar. Like I think that's the natural conclusion. But I think that you can even just stop the hypothesizing at just the fact that we can't agree. So trying to legislate a method around a controversial tool would just, I think it would be a disaster.
Yeah, I
Um,
100% agree with that. Like I really do. I think what we need to focus on is what do we do with the people that abuse dogs?
right.
And how do we decide where is that line in the sand? And who decides it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like going back to the dog with the kennel anxiety, what I did with the electric collar, that was very controversial to some people. Like there are plenty of people that would call that abusive. So it's hard. I think I don't mean to sound defeated, but I think it's kind of an impossible question. And I think that in many cases, it's good to rely on just your base instincts. And I do try when I'm watching training footage of a dog that looks like he's in rough shape, and I try not to just default to this person's beating this dog, this person's unhinged, this person's crazy. I really try to look like, what are you trying to do? And if I do want to know, I'm going to ask you. That's another thing too. I'm not going to share your video and put a bunch of motivations that I just don't know on this. There are some cases that are just clear cut. Like I think that
But
that video we talked about with
even in the clear cut cases, it's interesting what the human mind goes through to make those decisions, you know?
right, right. It's like that video that we were talking about before about the lady with the German Shepherd with the electric collar, where you just look and you're like, this is a hack job. Like this is bad. You know, like that. Like I'm scraping my mind for a justification for this, and I can't find it. If she were here, I'd ask her what you were trying to do. But I think there are clear examples like that, and then there are other examples, other situations where, yeah, I mean, you got a clip of a dog looking bad. It's like, what if in that moment I wanted him to feel bad?
Exactly. True. True.
So you're not, you need context. So you get that one too. Again, like the dog body language content farming, be very easy to take a very good dog trainer's video and just make it look atrocious, so bad. You could make me look like dog daddy if you took enough of my videos and condense them down and mess with them,
And have
time
the
alter them.
snippet. Yes, of course. Of course.
So it's it ultimately does boil down to, at least for me, where does the dog end up? So if you're a trainer doing the same thing over and over and over again, and the dog is in a visibly bad state and you are not getting anywhere, at some point there has to be a recognition in yourself that, hey, this isn't working. Like, I need to do something different. Because if you go beyond that point, now we're getting into territory where it's like, it's hard to defend.
I don't know why it just came to mind. I mean, there's a bunch of videos that came to mind, but I'm sure you've seen the one where the guy he had the dog in a crate and he was flipping the crate and he was putting water and taking him out and putting
Yeah,
him back in and doing all this. At
yeah,
this point, I can say, okay, I don't care what's the outcome and how the
yeah.
dog is. All that is nonsense.
Right,
That has nothing to do with whatever you're trying to accomplish. But still, I'm very curious. What are you really thinking you're doing?
right,
Like,
right.
what is going on in your head?
That
Is it
is that
really
is a
that you're just
gauge.
so like just abusive and you're just torturing the dog on purpose, or are you
Right,
genuinely thinking that you're on the right path and you're accomplishing something in the long run? Like, where are you going
right,
with this, you know?
right. And I think, just as being living things ourselves, if you have a visceral reaction to something someone is doing with a dog, I think that it's just very hard to be charitable. So, like, that video in question is just insane, like insane. It's just like where, like, what are you doing? And the intentions do matter. And I'm going to sound like a forcery advocate. The intentions do matter to a point, but then at some point, the dog is just so miserable. I don't care if you think you're doing the right thing. I think it's less of an indictment on you as a human being, but I still feel like the dog, like, this has to stop, and you have to find a better way. And
Yeah,
you could
I
have,
couldn't be staying with my phone filming this. I just
right.
couldn't do
Oh
that.
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. Like, I've never seen anything like that in person in my entire life. Like, that's just outrageous. That's just completely outrageous. But then at the same time, you could have a dog that is in maybe an equal level of suffering, but it started with a trainer just, like, doing their best and thinking that the only dial they have to turn is physical power. And again, it becomes an arms race between how tolerant the dog can become and how hard the trainer can pop the leash. And they end up in a place that is just pure warfare. And even though, again, the damage being done to the dog may be equivalent, this is a totally different moral issue in some ways. Like, you were trying when you started, at least. And now you're just, there's kind of that habituation loop where the trainer gets more frustrated, goes harder, gets more desperate, goes harder. The dog habituates to it, and then it's just ding, 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 ding. I don't necessarily, I think that's terrible. I think that's wrong. I think that if a trainer is repeatedly, again, doing the same things with the same dogs and getting nowhere, I think that this is very bad. But that one dude was basically waterboarding
Yeah,
a dog.
waterboarding is exactly what he
Like,
was
that
doing.
that that looked like interrogation tactics on just some pet German Shepherd or whatever it was. That's just like, what is totally a different level, in my opinion.
And that's the thing. Is it your lack of knowledge, education, or is it you just enjoying to do that to another living thing?
I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. But there are times where if something's not going well with a dog, I want to beat something up, but it's myself. Like, I want to take it out on myself. Like, I really will be super, super hard on myself, like brutally sometimes. And I think that it has, like, I'm not trying to play victim. I think it has made me get better. But if you're not that personality type to be really hard on yourself and you have that same energy, maybe it does just need to go somewhere. And it's just there's a dog in front of you and he can't defend himself. It is I think that also it could go back to the same root as the dogs are assholes plotting against you thought, where the seed is planted at the core that this is adversarial. So if something's going wrong in training, am I really wrong, or are you just trying to manipulate this? Are you trying to ruin this? Are you trying to bring this down? Are you trying to make me look bad? Like, y- you could see how someone could just fall down that hole, and it's super toxic.
But this is where the like the regulation, whatever we're thinking of regulations and we're
Yeah.
trying to push, it's not going to resolve this.
No, no. I think that truly, if you believe in punishment as a deterrent, which I do to some extent, I think there just needs to be serious penalties for this type of behavior. Um, but you're never going to, unless you outlaw owning dogs, like it's just never going to stop. Truly, it's just the people that are going to listen to us are already usually good people. Like you're not going to break through to a guy that's just unhinged and sadistic. So yeah,
You know, I
I don't
was
know what we do.
like a while back, maybe going back 4 or 5 years ago, there was a push in Florida to ban electric collars.
Hmm.
And thank God to social media and everything, and we kind of got together, and of course we went to hearings, and we thought about it, and the what we came down to was, let's have in our, like, if you have a pet training business, in your contract with the client, if you're going to use electric or you're going to use prong collar, you are very forward and they sign that you're okay with that. And then there is the training plan, which is not in any great detail, but there is some training plan. And then there is the final, you know, the dog goes home, and there is a closing paper. And we submitted this to the animal care and control. And we did this for like maybe, I don't know. I mean, I know I did it at least for a year and a half. And eventually, it just kind of faded away. Why? Because it didn't matter, because there was not one case of a pet owner to come forward and say, you fucked up my dog and you did something behind doors that was wrong. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that that cannot happen. It just, where I'm going with this is extremely, like, not difficult. I think it's impossible to have a regulation to go after abuse. Like, I think we are able to go after abuse on case by case. It's just that you cannot, like, if you're that person, you cannot just change the name of your business and stay in business. That's not cool. Or pay $500 and go on training dogs. There is something that has to be done, but I am totally in agreement with you. Regulation is not gonna do it. If anything, just like in Europe. I mean, look at the whole of Europe. It's just such a prime example, and they always tried, especially the force free, always are like, well, most of the countries in Europe, nobody, it's banned and whatever. No, it's banned and it's done. And if you don't believe it, too bad, but that's how it is. And the reason it continues, it's because the solution and the alternative that you're providing doesn't compare to the success. Like it fails. There is times that it fails. And you have to accept that. You cannot bullshit people that the force free is this superior and that there is a consensus and that there is, all this bullshit. Frustrating. I just got frustrated.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's maddening because if you are just looking at the dogs, this is obviously a gaslighting attempt on this mass scale. So you're saying, like in this case with Florida, they just couldn't find enough people saying, "Hey, my dog has been destroyed by an electric collar."
Right.
Like if you're having trouble finding these people with how many electric collars are probably in the state, this is some form of manipulation or reality distortion is going on. This just can't it can't be real. And I think that there's even worse effects too, because the connection between politics and culture, if you look at what could be the cultural impact as well of electric collars being banned, it's like I get people messaging me from other countries, especially again, like Europe and stuff. They're like, I would be horrified to just like say no to my dog loudly in public. Like truly, I'd be petrified someone would be causing a scene about this. And I can't relate to that because we just don't again, like the whole I guess resistance to regulation, but it would be brutal to know that, hey, here's a moment where I know I can make this dog's life better, but there are political forces that are making me second guess it. That would just be untenable to me. Like I don't know if I could train dogs under those conditions. And yeah, it's bad. It's terrible.
Strange. But I think in the last year I've become very optimistic that we are capable, knowledgeable, educated to stand our ground and not allow this nonsense to happen here. Like I'm absolutely comfortable with that. The only thing that I really feel bad about is that we cannot come and talk to each other and find some acceptance and see what we can do about the individual cases of bad situations, because that's way better I mean, that's a very good reason to focus on and but not that I have any solution to that either. It's just, it's so complicated. And everybody will say, well, education. Well, who do you get educated from? Do you come to my school? Do you go to Michael Ellis? Or do you go to Karen Pryor or Victoria Stilwell? There is like options. You have options. And this is brilliant. You should have options. And then if you're getting results, amazing. You don't need nothing else. And if you're not getting results, no matter where you are, you can search, because for sure you can find a place that you can get results. Or maybe not everything is going to be solved in your dog training career, but you will feel comfortable of what you can do and what you shouldn't do, and continue to grow. I don't know. It's a very strange business we're in. A lot of times, like, well, a doctor has to have a license, and they go through 8 years of, it's like, how we can compare this? It's like, and then somebody will say, well, the dog training is an art. And there is an art form of it, but it's not so much the art, it's the options that we have. And the analogies with artwork, I guess, it's just because you have the options. You can paint in like Picasso style, or you can paint in whatever, like you have choices, and there can be beautiful paintings. And ultimately, it goes back to what you were saying. It's the follow-up of where we are today. What is the dog's life look a year or 2 years or 10 years after the problem period that we've had to go through? That's enough.
Right. That's a huge thing that motivates me. It's looking at conventional wisdom. What is supposedly not possible? Can I do it? And if I can do it, I feel obligated to show it. And when it comes to behavioral rehab, obviously there's different definitions of what is success for the individual dog and the lifestyle, and how far gone is the dog really? Can you make it a 100% recovery? Does this dog need to be under some form of management forever? I don't think you need to have perfect answers for every single dog. I just think that if you take a dog that supposedly, by the vast majority of definitions, would be irredeemable, and you can show that dog by using aversive methods included, you can show that dog 6 months later running off leash at a beach, not holding himself back, not looking back at the owner, wincing, waiting for the shock, truly just exuberant and light, then we need to show it. Because to the average person, the fate of us being able to do what we do relies on the politics of people. If you're telling people repeatedly, this is not real, this is not possible, this is going to destroy dogs, but they can, in 2 clicks, pull up the exact opposite, like, this is just not even a debate anymore, at least with most people that aren't totally just trapped in cognitive dissonance. So that's a big
I
deal to
mean,
me.
that's optimistic view.
Yeah. Well, we
As we
have to.
said, like the I mean, look at the politics in politics. Like there is nobody will ever say we are not, as we made some wrong decisions, or we are on the wrong path, or whatever. There is that the fight goes on, and the fight will always go on.
But I think that at the heart of this debate, there is a majority of people that do love dogs. So in politics, the priorities between the multiple factions are typically just totally just off, like completely in different directions. Ultimately, I do think, again, excluding delusional people on both sides, religious zealots on both sides, I do think that at the core, people care about dogs. And if you can convince enough of them just to look at the evidence, I think that could seriously turn the tide. I actually don't even know if the tide needs to be turned. I think it may be going in the right direction, but it's all anecdotal. I don't have data based on that, but I look forward to, hopefully, a future where people are just showing dogs. Just show the dogs. Like, stop going to other people's pages and getting in arguments. If you want to do that, that's fine, but show the dogs. And I don't want to hear oh, well, it takes time to record things. Like, I get it, but if you have the time to go rip people apart in the comment section, you can definitely buy a $13 tripod from Best Buy and record some training sessions and show it. It's like, okay, if I'm going to make a very strong claim about aversives, I'm going to have just months and months and years of dogs to back it up. It's all we have in the pet world. We don't have trophies. So I I think that by thinking about evidence and the dogs and the attitude of the dogs, you can really dispel a lot of falsehoods. Hopefully. Again, very optimistic, but I need something to
Yeah,
cope
I
with.
would say, Dylan, you're definitely very optimistic because because like when you, I mean, like when you want to look for a certain data with certain outcome, you will
Oh yeah.
find that,
You'll
right?
find it. Yeah, you'll find it. For sure.
And
For sure.
that's kind of
But we don't have to win them all. We
right.
do not have to win them all.
Right.
Ultimately, it is a debate, and the people that are undecided, I think, will fall towards the more sane, rational, objective side. There's always going to be lunatics.
Yeah. I guess, you know
You know?
what I've kind of lately come to conclusion is, if you're a pet owner and you have this dog that you're in the fence, do you keep it? Do you euthanize it? Do you take it to the shelter? And you say you've tried everything. Really be honest with yourself and say, did you try everything? And
Yeah.
then decide what is everything for you, ethically and morally.
Mhm.
What lines you don't want to cross. And yeah.
But what are the two advantages we have there? What is the thing that they didn't try? They didn't try stopping him. What does stopping him often do? Work. So you get enough people that were apprehensive seeing it in real time. It's just, again, it's a long fought battle, but one dog at a time, one dog owner at a time. Not not even going out trying to fight for a political cause. I'm literally just going out and doing my job. I'm just doing the stuff that I think works, and we find out. Right? We find out, and I show it. So I don't necessarily think it's like a super loud call to action. It's more just like, hey, if you're proud of the work you're doing, show it. If you're invested, I think that should be the standard.
Social media, man, it's tough place to I mean, like, and especially with you, like there is so many trainers right now that are focusing on the social media
Yeah.
that I highly question, how does dog even get trained? Like
Right.
where does, like when it's time for these dogs to go home,
Yeah.
how are they going home? What is the deal? Because
So as far as I can tell, this is a relatively recent phenomenon. There is an entire industry revolving around training dog trainers on marketing. Like this is like a huge online grift where people pay to go on these Zoom calls to have marketing people who have never trained a dog before basically teach people how to selectively edit videos and what hashtags to use. And I think there's a little bit of a debate to be had. It's like, yeah, I like that people make money. That's cool. But you should probably be trying as hard as you can to get better at training dogs. That's what I think about. Again, bias, personal bias. I'm not a very business minded person. I'm just always trying to get better at training the dogs. I don't fault anyone for trying to make money, but it's like you said, when you watch some of these videos, nothing's happening. Nothing. Like sometimes less than nothing. Sometimes damage is being done. And if that's what you want to do, I don't like it, but okay. But if attached to that you are spreading mythology, now we have problems. So you have a well-edited video, you speak with confidence, you kind of are able to bedazzle and hypnotize enough pet owners to listen to you. But now you're saying that clicker conditioning is the only way to resolve extreme issues. Ultimately, what's going to happen is people are going to try it, it's going to fail, and then they're going to feel defeated. That's not okay. That's like that's where I start taking issue. And I don't I try really, really hard not to comment on other people's things because I just don't
it's
I just don't like
pointless.
it.
Yeah, it's pointless. Like I
It's
watch
pointless.
them. I watch them at nighttime. Sometimes I will have dinner with with Natalia, and she's just enjoying me narrating when we're watching some funny videos. I mean, it's just pure entertainment. Um, and I think a lot of people, I really hope that a lot of people are watching them in that sense, the way I do too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Morbid curiosity.
but we still make the clicks, we still make the
Yeah.
algorithms kick in. But it's absolutely insane. Like I mean, I have right now 3 people here with cameras. There is no way. Like I'm up and I have to get the dog and I have to train it. If somebody's here with the camera, okay, but that's not my priority. This is like absolutely I cannot. But maybe I'm just very old school. I grew up before this, and yeah, it's different.
It's it can be a serious hassle. There are times where I think of there was a TV show on National Geographic called Survivor Man, where this guy named Les Stroud would go out and basically do these mock survival scenarios. He had no camera crew, so he would have to set up scenarios with the camera in the distance, do the thing, and then go all the way back and collect his camera and set up these angles. So like there's this added level of nuisance on top of his task. There are times there are times for sure where I'm like, this kind of a pain in the ass, especially with aggressive dogs where you can't really afford to just hire a cameraman and be like, hey, let's see what happens while you're near us and I've got this dog. So
Right.
trying to find ways to record it myself is a pain. It's yeah,
And then there is that
sometimes.
moment where you're like in the middle, like you're in a very critical point in what's going on with the training at the moment. And you're like, well, I'm not filming. Well, I cannot possibly think about the problem of I'm not filming it when I'm at that moment with the dog. It just cannot happen. But I know that the social media trainers they would abandon the training at that moment because the priority will be the
Yeah,
material.
there's no point. Yeah, you lost your chance. Yeah, yeah, it's tough. I think that there is a good back and forth on it, but my my caveat is here. I know that it's a nuisance sometimes, but if you are going to be on the internet making sweeping, huge, confident statements about how you have a solution to everything, you've unlocked the mysteries of the universe, you can critique every other trainer you see, you can take the time to record it. Truly, what are the chances that this genius, savant, dog Jedi is doing these unbelievable things and just doesn't feel like recording it? Like, that's I'm not going to buy that. So it really depends. I don't think that there's a moral obligation to do it. And this is my bias being in the pet world. The pet world is largely gate kept and almost presided by in a judicious way, a judgmental way over people that just talk shit.
Oh,
Like
it's brutal for
they
sure.
just talk shit. Like that's literally the extent of what they do is take other people's videos and then talk shit about them. And again, making sort of like either super uh, strong claims about something or vague like, yeah, I guess I've seen way worse dogs than this. It's like, dude, then like if there's no evidence, then just like trust me, bro, is not a good enough source here. I care too much about dog training to just be like, yeah, this random person with 40,000 followers on TikTok is just like a genius. Like, there's just no fucking way. Like, I've
Yeah,
got you and I've
I
got the dogs.
do you think a lot of people start to kind of catch on to this, that the number of followers and likes are not really a statement, a testament, or do you think most people get fooled by that?
I think that most people get fooled, unfortunately. And I don't necessarily only mean fooled. I think that people get intimidated. So other trainers. I've had plenty of people tell me like I am horrified. Like I love that people put up videos. I'm horrified to do it. I'm petrified because I know this one account, maybe they're going to repost me and just destroy my
Tear you up.
business.
Yep.
They're going to attack
Yep.
me. It's so it is sort of like a Mexican standoff where everyone's just standing there with guns pointed at each other, waiting for someone to post a clip with a dog with his tail tucked for 3 seconds. And then it's just destruction. And I will admit it at the beginning, I had one video go incredibly viral for no reason. And like I'm waking up in the morning and I've got 15,000 notifications, like just crazy shit, right? There was a level of negativity, even if it's just 3% of it. If you are just a sane, like emotionally stable human being, even if you're confident, if you get enough bombardment at you, just nastiness, eventually it will chip your wall down at some point. Like at some point. So there was a moment where I was like, dude, do I should I keep doing this? Like this is crazy. Like I'm looking at my notifications. People are like, I'm contacting your local police department. You're a psychopath, you're beating dogs for money. And it's literally just I had a slip collar on a dog and I like moved him. And I can see how people would be like, I'm just gonna hide what I do. Like I'm just not gonna show anything. Like if this is the atmosphere, I can't stick my neck out. And I'm glad I went the opposite direction and I just doubled down and I was like, hey, for better or for worse, I'm just gonna show the dog. And people are gonna have to decide if I was right or wrong. And I don't know what's going to happen. But
No,
if you
like I love your follow-ups. I mean, this is like the most important part,
yeah, and I've thought about I think it's just a rabbit hole that'll just ultimately piss me off. I've thought about going back to the comment sections on some of these dogs at the beginning where people are like, this dog's dead. You have no chance. Put him down. You're making him worse. And it's like I'm getting messages from the client of this dog like running around with a group of kids. Like
You don't want
it's
to go
insane.
back in the
No,
comments.
you don't. You don't. You don't. I like have almost made a policy in my mind. It's like I'm just not going to check the comments on a video older than 1 week. I'm just not going back. Like it's a wasteland. It doesn't exist. Um,
Yeah, the
I don't
the,
know.
the people that comment, no, no,
I've
absolutely.
gotten one apology. I've gotten one apology. One person. I had one person message me very graciously, and I don't like this. I didn't ask for this, but I just like, hey, I like blew up at you over that first clip. I even still don't like how you train in many ways, but I have to admit, in this case, I was off. Like, I'm glad this dog had you. And I'm like, hey, I accept that. That is totally fine. I don't think we all need to agree, but some like baseline level of humanity where people are willing to show the work. It would be nice, you know? Um, So we need the guys waterboarding their dogs to get ripped,
Yeah,
and we
we
need
gotta find some ways of better handling this. But man, there's just so many problems.
right.
Like, you know, like I tell you, I mean, seriously get bombarded sometimes with videos of like 10 seconds of, oh, look at this. It's like, no, I'm not even bothering to look at it because
Yeah.
like, like it's a dead end. That is just
Right.
not the way to go about anything. Like, as you
Right.
said, just because you see 10 seconds, you have no idea what else is going on. You like that absolutely. Oh, not easy. Where do you think that
Yeah.
whole thing's going? What's the prediction?
On dog training as a whole,
Social media and killing each other, blasting each other, and sometimes for a
well,
reason and sometimes just for pure, like, tribal human, like, no, you guys are wrong because you're doing it this way and we are doing it and you don't.
I I will speak. to dog training, the social media, because which is kind of our small, weird little world, but there is a lot of activity there. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of trainers, there's a lot of people consuming that content. I do, and again, maybe I'm being optimistic here. I think that dog training has such a strong reality bias that ultimately, even in the sieges and the bombardments and people losing their minds and being tribal, I think that people want truth at some core unspoken level, and we are mostly united by dogs looking good and feeling good. And you don't have to be a dog trainer to see a dog at peace. And if we can show that, I think that's where it'll go. I think that if we lean into the shaming and fear, and there's a larger discussion too about what about trainers just showing mistakes? How do we handle telling a trainer, "Hey, I think you could have gone about this a different way," without like nuking them and destroying them? Because that's hard. That's like actually a hard, especially if you don't know the person, that's a hard thing to do. Like I've had trainers that I know come up to me kind of like awkwardly like, "Hey, I don't know how to like get like start this subject, but I think you could do this differently." I'm like, "Dude, let me have it. Like I know you, I trust you. I know you're a good dog trainer. I want to hear this." But if it's just like, I don't know, XX dog wizard 69 XX at whatever Gmail, and he's just like, "Hey, you could do this differently." It's like, dude, I don't care. It's like building the rapport with the dogs. It's like you're gonna correct the dog when he just doesn't give a shit what you think. He doesn't care. So how do you do that? I don't know. Maybe a more like a private, like a DM, like, "Hey, I think I know a better way. If you're interested, let me know."
And
I've never
that's
sent a
way
message like
different.
that, but
That's
maybe that's
way
it.
different when you know that's almost like talking in person. That's totally different ballpark. You know what is trending? I'm sure you do because you're in it. The talking about the mistakes, like I think right now trainers, not the new kind of trick of social media is to show the mistakes, but even the mistakes are kind of, you watch the video and they're like just artificially produced as, okay, we're like in the middle of something, but it's like, no, like I see what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. There's some sleight of hand, and I actually, in a weird way, can almost appreciate when the sleight of hand is done well, or in a way that I hadn't seen before. Where I'm like,
Oh yeah, you have
okay.
to admire when
I'm
of
like,
course.
yeah, it's like someone finding a way to bend the rules in a game. You're like, that's kind of cool that you did that. I don't like the motivation, but I appreciate it. And like you get a lot of videos that the audio has been tweaked with. So like people trying to show, "Hey, my dog can read my mind." And there's very clearly a person off camera giving some sort of auditory cue, but they've like muted certain sections. And that just totally, like, that was pretty well edited. Like I like that. Um but people get bored of the same thing. So again, like, how many reels do you see of like my Belgian Shepherd is starting protection work? Like you just see the same thing over and over and over and over again. People want to see their favorite breed doing cool
Dude, I'm
things.
tired of watching puppies luring with food healing. Like
Yeah.
like
Oh,
how
it's
how
brutal. It's
how
brutal.
much more we
Yeah.
can do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
It's
spin to the
tough.
left, spin to the right. It's okay,
Yeah.
but like,
Or the agility stuff. It's like, okay, dude, your dog already wants to do that.
let's
Like that.
switch. Let's switch. What like at this point where you are, what keeps you excited and keeps you going? Because in the industry, as we are talking, as brutal as it is, you have to have the thick skin, you have to have the knowledge, but there is something else that different people makes them go and enjoy. What is that for you?
So quick statement on that. on the state of the industry and everything, I definitely don't want to come off as ungrateful or as like a victim or something. I get to talk to and interact with and work with really, really cool people all the time. Even people that just flat out disagree with me. I love those interactions when they're done in a normal functioning like way. And I get to see a lot of really cool dogs. And it is, I never thought this was even a job. Like that's it's incredible to me. So I don't want to sound really negative. I think you just, when there are negative things, you do need to talk about them. As far as what keeps me going, it's it is really, really interesting to me. Again, there's like a couple different answers. I guess the one answer on the moral element, my dad, like when I was really, really young, he's an outdoorsman, hunter. He very clearly, in his way, taught me the concept of mercy with animals, which is kind of, the vegan take would be, hey, that's Rich. This is the guy that's shooting arrows at deer. But the idea that if there's an animal in suffering and you are capable of doing something about it, do it. Like, do something. Whether in that grim world it involves putting an animal out of his misery, or if it involves getting an animal out of a trap or something, right? Like it's an inherently bad thing for living things to be in pain, and if you are capable, you need to act. So that is a very strong motivator for me, especially considering, I mean, you know better than anybody, the worst dogs benefit so much from the basics. So it's not like I'm like killing myself. It's like, dude, I'm just like, I'm treating these dogs like they're normal and they change. So it feels like an obligation to me in that way. It's like I'm very, in my opinion, oftentimes low effort doling out mercy to dogs that are in trouble for no good reason at all. But that's definitely a motivation for me. I think that in terms of the craft of dog training, I just think that the world of behavioral rehabilitation is so weird and so random. And it is fascinating to run into new scenarios that it's just like, what am I even going to do with this dog, dude? Like, what am I even, where do I start with this thing? So there's a moment, I know it's going to be an interesting program when the dog gets dropped off to me and the owner leaves and it's just me and the dog in the room and I'm looking at him and I'm like, what do I do? Like, holy shit. Like this is it gets me really excited. And I'm constantly, again, I mentioned I'm picky about who I work with. It's not just the people. I'm looking for the most bizarre, unhinged, just out there dogs that I can get my hands on. And I'm trying to find a dog that's really going to like, in some ways, put me to my limit. And I've been kind of lucky in that it feels like the dogs that I've taken on have been in a pretty smooth incline in terms of challenge level. So I'm getting them at the right time, and I really appreciate that. But I go into a state of panic almost when I feel like I'm stagnating. Like, am I training dogs the same way as I was like a year ago? Like, that's disgusting. I have to do something about that. And it turns out that the dogs, if they are challenging and strange, will force
And
you
if you're paying
to
attention,
change.
they absolutely.
They will tell you, they truly, it's not like, oh well, the healing could have been a little bit better or the recall could have been a little bit sharper. It's like, no, 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 no. I have to figure out how to help this dog or we're getting destroyed or this plane is just crashing. So the stakes keep me really activated and really just like searching for improvements. That's definitely a huge driving force for me, which is interesting. It's a contrast because before training without conflict, these types of dogs scared me. Not necessarily for my safety, but for the fact that like I don't even know where to start. Like I'm going in defeated. And now I go in, I'm basically like walking into a burning building going like this is great.
I have
Like
options.
what can I start? Like I know what to ask. I know where to start. If that fails, I'm almost like, if my normal tactics fail, I'm almost excited. I'm like, holy shit, I got to do something different. This is weird. Like, this is cool.
Yeah, I can see
It's
how that. Yeah, I mean, you just answered my question brilliantly. Yeah, that's like, I wish dog trainers get to that place. There is quite often, especially like, you know that I listen and I follow all the webinars and APDTs and all this, and quite often there will be an actual presentation on trainer burnout, and basically they're not making the money or not feeling successful, or just kind of really truly burned out of, like, with a big question mark, should I go on? What do you tell those people? Because there is that other side that you just described. There is this excitement about doing what you're doing, but there is
yeah.
many dog trainers, and I promise you there are many dog trainers that are highly questioning if that's something they should be doing. And probably, just like with painting, you cannot paint. You can do squares by numbers, and that's, you have to accept that.
So this is another really good one. You could go on for a while. There's sort of like an instant surface level answer, a question I would ask, and I would tell the trainer, hey, like, to the best of your ability, be honest with yourself and with me when you answer this. Are you doing busy work? Like, what does your program look like? Because if I get an answer that, while I'm in my kitchen in my pajamas with a kibble bag, luring a dog into heel and going dog after dog after dog, day after day after day, if that's what you're doing, yeah, dude, I would quit. I would burn out in a week, because I went through a phase where I was doing that, where the extent of what I did was just, hey, I'm getting the reps, therefore something good is happening. And then when you realize that you can actually, there's no trade-off in that, you can enjoy the dog more and get a better result. That's where it really flipped for me, where I pretty much don't take days off. Like, I just don't. I always have a board and train. Sometimes, like in the winter in upstate New York, I'll back off on private lessons because I just don't want to stand out in a park and freeze. But like, I'm still doing private lessons sometimes, and like, it doesn't. I'm still thinking about the dog that I have, and I'm looking forward to the next dog. But it's because I'm not staring at a wall of 5,000 down reps, 6,000 heel reps, 10,000 sit engagement reps, click food, click food. Like, I'm not. The less mechanical you are, I think the longer you can go without just losing your mind. And I don't want to say that there's anything wrong with being mechanical and being proficient, but if what you are doing is effectively sitting at a computer with the dog, then yeah, you're going to lose your mind. Straight up. And doing things like taking on challenges too. That's just as a last response to that.
True,
Like,
very true. Like, you
like
have to,
go, like, I have a dog coming in
but
a
it,
couple
it has
weeks
to be
that,
calculated.
oh, sure, sure. You don't want to like crush yourself and set yourself up to lose, but like, I've got a dog coming in a couple weeks, and the client just from time to time will send me a video of some behavior going on, and I'm like, dude, I can't wait. Like, by all measures, this dog is a disaster, but I'm like, this is going to be sick. Like, this dog is going to be out of control, and it's going to be awesome. I don't like challenging yourself, allowing the dogs to challenge you, and pay attention to what you're doing. And it's really hard to get bored of this, in my opinion.
Very cool. Man, that was a good, cool conversation.
How long did we go? What time
I
is it?
have no idea. It's 8 o'clock.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
We've been
Cool.
talking. I don't know when I'm going to see you in person again, but looking forward to, man. That was a very good conversation. And hopefully, like people that are studying or people that are bummed out in the industry get excited and get, alive and
It doesn't have to be that way, and it is fun to try really hard. Like it is. Just go all out.
And a lot of
But
times
thanks.
you have to listen to your heart, like I don't know. I was going to finish the podcast right now, but here I am. And I think I mentioned this last podcast, and it just keeps replaying in my head. And people and dogs have been interacting with each other for thousands of years. We didn't know Skinner. We didn't know shit. And a lot of cool things were happening simply because, for whatever reason, humans have that gift when they pay attention to open up and interact with another species, and specifically a dog. And there is a way that we come to some agreement and cooperation, and it's beautiful. And yeah. Anyway, man.
It's hard to do that with cookie cutter flowchart methods and approaches.
Right. That
it's hard.
just
It's hard to
stops you.
see it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I see you sometime next year. And for now, Merry Christmas to you and the family. And yeah, it was a good one. Thank you, man.
This was fun. Thank you for having me on.
All right, Dylan.